Chapter 81. Fire at me. What others didn't know was that while Byron was waving his hands vigorously at Redbeard, he was actually beating his feet in anger at the whale song idiot. Your coordination efficiency is too poor. They just arranged a simple battle line according to the predetermined plan, but they still couldn't get it done after half an hour. According to the Navy's wartime regulations, let alone being so lame, even if the captain just left the squadron without permission and sailed on his own, he would be shot 100 times. How can we really kill a big Redbeard without a battle line and a saturation attack? Violet rubbed her buzzing ears. Although he was a great pirate of the third rank, he had no intention of refuting and only explained in a low voice pirates are used to fighting alone. We had a good plan at the beginning, but when we were executing it, we found that our plan was too ambitious but our execution was inadequate. Even though the Flaming Rose was in the middle, I couldn't see the other warships 1 or 2 kilometers away. Moreover, unlike the Kingdom-class battleship lines, which are composed of battleships of level 3 or above, they are similar in shape and have similar parameters, making coordination easier. It is much more difficult for our ragtag army. The sailors on the pirate ship had not received any training and could barely imitate the movements. When the smoke of war comes later, our vision and coordination will be even worse. Everyone knows that for an undercover agent, confidentiality is the top priority. No one except Violet herself is aware of Byron's existence. As a novice commander, she has tried her best to achieve this independently. This was the result of the full cooperation of other big pirates. I'm already here, wait for my news. While the two were talking, the Golden Deer had quickly broken through the obstruction of the surrounding antique ship coffins and arrived next to the Goddess of Vengeance. There was no slowing down at all. Brooke, the Guardian Knight, controlled the steering wheel and made a large angle drift on the sea. In the moment of passing each other, Byron pulled a rope hanging from the topmast and swung onto the deck of the Nemesis like a nimble monkey. He rolled over to release the force, and bounced up unscathed, saluted to Redbeard with his chest. Captain, I was entangled by a group of ship coffins on the way, which delayed me a little. I am late. Redbeard stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder with some excitement. Mr. Bill, I have a pair of eyes that have seen countless people, and I really didn't make a mistake. Your loyalty shines brighter than gold. Then he looked at the three-masted ship behind Byron, his tone was obviously eager. That's the Golden Deer under your command, right? You guys. Byron immediately understood the other person's look, which clearly said, whose subordinate is this? Good stuff, I want it. Every great pirate who aspires to be the Pirate King values talent. What's more, the performance of that ship just now was so outstanding that anyone would want to take it under his command. But before Redbeard could speak to persuade him to stay, Brooke, who had already had a tacit understanding with Byron, drove the Golden Deer without saying a word and broke out from the other side. The 32-pound carronade fired continuously on the way, sending all the ship coffins that dared to block the way into the bottom of the sea, making Redbeard even more jealous. He originally thought that the Golden Deer was just a fledgling pirate, but now he has seen the superiority of this sailboat as a pirate ship. Byron blocked Redbeard's sight and blamed himself bitterly. This pirate ship, its captain, and its crew are truly outstanding. But it can't help much in a battle of this level. It was not easy to send me back and let me fight side by side with the Nemesis, the captain, and my colleagues, and share life and death together. Letting them roam around the periphery can at least share the firepower of the ship coffin. I also encountered 2 of the 7 free pirate ships you assigned to me outside, but they refused to help. I regret that I was unable to bring you more reinforcements. After hearing these words, Redbeard was moved and said with regret and approval, as long as your right-hand man can return safely, it will be the greatest luck for me as a captain. Don't worry, I have already sent the list of free pirates who have surrendered to us back to the Admiralty and have joined the investigation. You can tell your friends that as long as this battle can be won, the York family will never be reluctant to give away a letter of marque. It is not even a dream to recruit them as real naval officers one day and turn them into masters. As he spoke, he patted a small conch shell around his waist that was as black as an iron shell. Byron had seen this strange object echo conch a long time ago. Just speak into it and it will generate an echo in another conch in the pair, with a maximum communication distance of 1,000 kilometers. It can also record all echoes within 3 months and play them back at any time. This is also one of his goals. I think there must be a lot of private affairs of Redbeard and the York family preserved in it. Thank you, Captain. They will certainly appreciate your kindness. But now is not the time to talk. I am the best at signaling on the Nemesis. I will go up to the mast and help you and the signal officer dispatch the fleet. Without saying a word, Byron, who had just come to the rescue, saluted Redbeard again and quickly climbed up the side rope of the mizzen mast. The surrounding pirate officers, including Redbeard, admired his courage from the bottom of their hearts. Some praised him as loyal and heroic, while others laughed at him and called him a brave fool. What is about to begin is not a boarding battle. In a long-range artillery battle, exposed on the exposed mast, you can only leave your life to fate and never know when a stray bullet will take your life. What a joke! Do you think you have the captain's immortality? When Byron climbed up to the mast with a monocular telescope, he could see all the enemy ships on the opposite side at a glance from this place with the best view. The first action was to send a message to Violet. Miss Artist, I have reached the best spot in the stand. The view here is good. You just need to repeat my instructions to the entire ship. Next, please start your performance. The other side responded crisply. Understood. Stay tuned, Mr. Good Citizen. On the Flaming Rose, Violet's demeanor suddenly changed, causing the pirate officers around her to stare at her in awe. The confidence on her face seemed to be radiating light, making people almost think that she was possessed by a god. Violet used the whalebone amulet to quickly encode her 6 warships, including the Longwind, Bristol, and Lightning Peregrine, in a queue from front to back. Then the instructions were reissued in an orderly manner, even reaching the pirate officers of various functional departments. Ship number 1 is too prominent, pay attention to the spacing. Loosen the main mast rigging and adjust the topsail 10 degrees, leaving a margin for the windward angle to keep in line with the warship behind. Ship number 2 loosens the reefed sail on the mizzen topsail, follows the lead ship closely, keeps the bearing line, and sets the standard for the warships behind. The position of the third ship is the most critical. As these orders were issued through whale song, the several pirate ships that were originally in a mess immediately found a backbone and gradually merged into a unified whole. It's not hopeless, otherwise it would be much more difficult to hunt down Redbeard. Looking at the battle line that was initially formed in front of him, Byron nodded secretly with satisfaction. Commanding a fleet is much like commanding a sailing ship. Take the rigging system on a ship, which consists of hundreds of cables. Most educated modern people would feel dizzy at the sight of all those tangled riggings, so how could an illiterate sailor remember them? Equally impossible. Rigging is like a computer program, with a very simple composition of only zeros and ones, moving supports and static supports, but the combination is extremely complex. Fortunately, a boat is operated by hundreds of people, and each person only needs to be responsible for one of the ropes. The rigging sailor only needs to follow the regulations and remember what kind of whistle the rigging master blows or what kind of command he should tighten or release the rope in his hand. Only the rigging captain is the old sea dog who has spent his whole life practicing repeatedly at sea and is familiar with and understands the use of all rigging. The same principle applies to battleship command. All it takes is a systematic command network to integrate all the warships and let each combat unit do the right thing at the right time, which will be the greatest victory. And at this time, Byron is the brain of this command system. Being in the best audience seats allowed him to see things particularly clearly. In just 10 minutes, the large pirate fleet of the Bay people formed a relatively strict, simple battle line. Although the Taiwanese side has one less ship, and none of their ships has firepower that can match that of a third-level ship like the Nemesis. However, they have good internal relations and mutual trust, and they also have a small-scale real-time command system like the whalebone amulet whale song, which makes them look more like a regular army. On the other hand, the Redbeards not only had their own ulterior motives, but also used backward flag signals. Without training and coordination, they cannot form the same battle line, let alone fight against an adverse situation. This time the advantage is really mine. Under Byron's command, the neat battle line suddenly took the initiative to move away from the number 1 target, the Nemesis. Because the effect of the mark of hatred was still there, when the battle line was pulled away by the wind, this third-level ship immediately accelerated passively and left its already untidy formation exposed to the dark muzzles of the Taiwan People's Fleet. At this time, all the warships rushed forward again against the wind and entered the enemy's firing range. But the wake, which was less than 300 meters long, could no longer threaten the battle line formed by 6 warships. It was at this time that Commander Byron finally issued the order to start the war fleet salvo, fire at me. Fire! The main guns of 6 Tier 4 ships, or equivalent, in a whole battle line fired simultaneously. Boom! 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 The orange-red cannon flames illuminated the dark sea, reflected the red clouds in the sky, and stung the eyes of all enemy pirates. Chapter 82, Stirring Up the Storm and the Greatest Art. The hot shells emitted a shrill scream and, carrying enormous kinetic energy, slammed into the Red-Beard fleet, whose formation was in disarray. Their decks, gun ports, and hulls all exploded in an instant, leaving countless holes of all sizes. The heavy cast iron shells bounced violently on the ship, brutally crushing anyone who dared to stand in their way, whether mortal or extraordinary, into a bloody mist. The 24-pound guns equipped on this team of 4th-level ships have a range of up to 4 meters when the firing angle is 1,350 degrees, when the firing angle is raised to 8 degrees, it can reach 2,250 meters. At an ultra-close distance of 100 meters, the solid shells fired by the 24-pound gun could easily penetrate a 1-meter-thick oak hull. The defense of both the 3rd-level and 2nd-level ships is useless. Especially the Goddess of Vengeance was trapped in its own web and originally wanted to hold on to the Flaming Rose tightly. However, due to the latter's sudden change of formation and passive advance, they were forcibly pulled out of formation and bore the brunt of the strongest wave of concentrated fire. Fight back! Fight back! However, the counterattack of the privateering fleet was obviously much more scattered, and there was even a low-level accident where the firing range was blocked by friendly ships. This is the excellence of the line of battle tactics. Due to the layout of sailing warships, most of the guns are installed on both sides of the ship. When a fleet is organized into a group of several warships, arranged in a column battle formation, and engages in broadside battles by firing in turns, it can fully exert its firepower. Enter the artillery range and move parallel to the enemy ship. Each ship bombards the designated enemy ship until the winner is decided or one side retreats. The battle line is an enlarged version of the firing line tactic at sea. It is also a comprehensive showdown of today's command, tactics, equipment, courage, and perseverance. After a wave of salvos, Violet's Flaming Rose achieved the most fruitful results. Ship bow image Rose Girl has made great contributions. Unique effect, double bullet shooting. In order to ensure that the enemy ship's hull could be penetrated, the crew often loaded 2 shells at a time and filled them with sufficient gunpowder. This was called double bullet shooting. But the artillery blessed by the Rose Girl does not need it. They only need to load 1 shell, and what they fire is a double shell. One is a normal cast iron shell, and the other is a high-temperature fireball shell equivalent to a scorching shell. Just like Violet's personality, this is a battleship that has increased its attack power to the limit. The 2 shells, one in front and one behind, turned the thick hull and even thicker ribs of the 3rd-class ship into decorations that were not much stronger than paper. 18 24-pound guns could be used as 36 guns, and even had an advantage in firepower over the 30 24-pound secondary guns on the leeward side of the Nemesis. Reload, and shoot at me again, and hit me in the head. Unlike the high-spirited Flaming Rose, the Nemesis was in a state of mourning. Save me, save me. On the upper gun deck, a gunner held his legs that were cut off by a shell and called for help from his companions. The other pirates, who had managed to control the runaway bronze cannons and were now covered in dust, shook their heads when they saw his appearance. It was very heartwarming to draw the gun and give him a quick kill. In order to prevent the corpse from getting in the way during the battle, the pirates didn't even bother to give their companion a decent pirate funeral. They just threw him and his 2 hairy legs out of the gun port. Then they immediately re-entered the battle and fired back at the opposing one-man battle line. They have been blessed by the figurehead, which increases their hit rate by 20%. The higher the firing frequency, the more shells will hit the enemy ship. Reload, fire. The pirates on the open main deck were not having a good time either. A fireball landed right next to a 9-pound cannon and ignited the gunpowder barrel placed there. In an instant, the entire 5-man artillery crew and the sailors who supplied them with gunpowder were sent into the sky. The surrounding cast iron shells, crowbars, rods, wooden corks, swords, etc. were also blown away, turning everything around into a sieve. The sailor who was squeezed on the mizzenmast with Byron was very unfortunate and was stabbed to death by a rod used to load cannonballs. He fell headfirst and turned into a pool of flesh on the deck. Byron, on the other hand, was unharmed and didn't even blink. A true warrior. A loyal minister who devoted his life to the cause, even the most harsh pirate officer could not help but break out in a cold sweat as he gave such a comment to him. But no one noticed. Captain Redbeard was clearly dozens of meters away from the explosion site, yet he was tragically affected. One of his eyes was blinded by a dagger that fell from some gunner. Perhaps today they have become accustomed to the captain's bad luck, and no matter how tragic it is, it is difficult to surprise them anymore. This is the reason why Byron dared to board the enemy ship Nemesis and even shouted to Violet, "Fire at me." If they could really aim every shot at me, maybe this matter would have been resolved a long time ago. Byron sighed with regret, and did not forget to help the signal officer standing on the poop to hang up a new signal flag. But before hoisting the flag, he had already received the order from Redbeard before other combat units. To this ship, cancel the hatred mark to prevent it from passively leaving the team and sailing on its own again. To the fleet, move closer to me, in a line formation. Byron notified Violet immediately and gave some advice to the Taiwanese princess who would have to stand on her own sooner or later. Remember, don't be like Redbeard who desperately tried every possible means to cure his illness. Fleet command is not a game. It is not possible to guarantee the implementation of predetermined tactics simply by smoothly conveying orders. The most difficult part of anything is execution. If the captains are not talented enough to change formations quickly, it would be useless and dangerous. When captains do not fully understand the attack pattern chosen by their commanders, a last-minute change of formation can turn into an unmitigated disaster. Orders: the battle line stabilizes, stays in sync, and continues firing. Our opponents are all large warships, and it is unrealistic to sink the enemy ships in a short period of time. The gunpowder magazine located below the waterline also has sufficient safety measures to make it difficult for it to cause a secondary explosion. The primary goal now is to break their will and use bloody and heavy losses to break through the psychological defenses of other big pirates. Let this gang that was united by interests also fall apart because of interests. The impetuous atmosphere in the fleet tells me that we won't have to wait too long for this time point. At this moment, Byron was like a giant spider monster that had woven a large web and was waiting eagerly above the battlefield. All the naval warfare tactics he learned in the past became his hunting skills. It was a difficult battle to operate in this battlefield composed of wind, sails and artillery fire, but it was also progressing rapidly over time. A storm knight was in the center of the storm, but he chose to hide in the safest eye of the storm, commanding the storm in front of him to devour everything. The spirituality became more and more lively, and seemed to gradually blend into every turbulence of this storm, turning its hands to make rain and stirring up the wind and clouds. No one except Violet knew that both fleets were now at the fingertips of the same hands. All ships are free to fire. Don't just target Redbeard. Pay attention to the other big pirates as well. Hit them hard. Thick smoke rose up like clouds, and lines of fire intertwined and burst out. Violet strictly implemented Byron's steady and cautious tactics, responding to ever-changing circumstances with the same strategy. The battle line consisting of 6 warships in a row slanted forward and charged towards the Redbeard fleet, whose formation was scattered and barely in a line, in the biting sea breeze. The two fleets were sailing in the same direction with the wind. The deafening explosions never stopped from the beginning, and crew members on both sides' warships died miserably every moment. But the longer the battle lasted, the more frightened the pirates on Redbeard's side became. The miserable cries of their companions quickly destroyed their already limited fighting spirit. Fight back! Fight back! Aren't we 7 against 6? With a 3rd-level ship, why can't we defeat this? The only response they received was even more fierce bombardment. The big pirates of the bay were well prepared. Even if the displacement of some pirate ships was inferior to that of the 4th-level ships, they emptied the inventory in Iron Anchor Bay and increased the caliber of the installed artillery to the limit. The one-time instantaneous projectile mass reached an astonishing 2,322 pounds. You have to know that even for a first-class battleship with 110 guns, the projection mass of a single broadside gun is only 1,236 pounds. The wills of both sides cannot be compared. A mob that comes together for profit may collapse if there are 10% or even 5% casualties. But some powerful armies can fight to the last man, creating perverted records that are even more outrageous than novels. Among the Bay Pirates and the Free Pirates who support them, many members or their relatives are traditionalists of Anchor Bay who are not afraid of life or death for their parents, wives, and children. When the battle came to the end of the first hour, which was also the 4th hour after the fighting phase began, the restlessness within the Redbeard fleet finally reached a climax. All it takes is a spark to set it off. Byron, who was always watching everything, caught this at the first moment, his eyes sharpened, and he gave a decisive order. Let's have another round of volleys. Bring out all your best skills and try to defeat them in one round. Violet, who had been acting as a mouthpiece and receiving countless admiring looks, immediately perked up when she heard this, her face beaming with joy. I can't wait any longer, good citizen, Please enjoy my grand finale. You must not die. He turned his head and shouted to the gunner on the ship. Load me with double bullets. Fire. The naval guns fired a salvo. With the effect of Rose Girl, double bullet shooting plus double bullet shooting, just one boat can almost fill the entire screen with a fierce momentum. However, due to the limited bearing capacity of the bronze barrel, this attack can only be launched once a day. The other 5 warships coordinated their efforts, and the overwhelming artillery shells poured towards the enemy ships like hot iron rain. This is just the beginning. Violet then pulled a white whalebone whistle from the traveler's bag at her waist and blew it hard, but it produced no sound audible to human ears. Suddenly, a red color emerged from beneath the water. The dense red scales were like arrows shot from a bow, dragging white lines as they rushed towards the opposite side. That was the massive school of fish fed with gunpowder formula, Kiss of Flame, which she had kept as her trump card until now. In fact, this is Violet's graduation project at the Vienna Academy of Arts. Although she herself called it the greatest art, the real essence is actually just one word. Fry. Chapter 83, Deathly Struggle, Bloody Flags Flying. When the first wave of salvos landed, the morale of the entire Redbeard fleet began to collapse rapidly. The most important thing for victory on the battle line is to obey orders more than the enemy and fight bravely, while success or failure depends on persistence. When you can't hold on any longer, that's the beginning of complete defeat. Most people no longer had time to fight back and were all busy plugging the leaks in the warship. Quick, the board, bring the board over here. The gun ports on the lower level are also leaking. The twist material is all used up, Carpenter, hurry up. Whether it is a pirate ship or a warship, the work of plugging holes is indispensable during an artillery battle. When the battle reaches this point and the hull near the waterline is hit, even the carpenters on the ship will become combat posts. They needed to bring their own tools, rush to the woodworking passage inside the hull as soon as possible, and then quickly nail wooden boards or lead plates on the holes. Then what is that? The carpenter who was patching a leak near the waterline rubbed his eyes. Through the hole the size of a human head that was constantly letting in water, he saw the sea surface outside suddenly turned red as if it was burning. Looking more closely, I discovered that it was actually a densely packed school of fish, tens, hundreds, thousands of them, so numerous that I couldn't count them all at once. At that time, all the crew members had witnessed with their own eyes the tragic scene of Redbeard being blown into the sky by a group of fish bombs. How come you don't know what this is? Oh no! The carpenter was not the only one screaming in horror. The pirates on the boat, who had just been congratulating themselves for surviving another round of volleys, now had their eyes widened and let out hoarse ho-ho-ho sounds from deep in their throats. He couldn't even scream. Don't even think about it. Don't even think about defeating me a second time with the same trick. Redbeard, who had half of his body taken away by a shell, had just recovered and his eyes were wide open with anger. Take out a bottle of yellow-green potion from the box kept by the first mate Jackal Harvey. The biggest problem with the sequence system is that there are no secrets, and moves that have been used once can be easily targeted. When he was targeted by the gunpowder artists for the first time, Redbeard couldn't even protect himself, let alone others. But since it has been confirmed that they will have to fight, how could he not think of ways to prepare in advance? Dragon Dung Potion. It does not come from forbidden knowledge, but is a secondary invention by the wilderness sequence adventurers. It is said that it was before the Silver Age, when dragons were still everywhere, supernatural powers had no system, and adventurers were not a sequential profession. Dragon dung is often used by them to scare away various wild beasts. Although nowadays, let alone pure blood, even the various subspecies carrying dragon blood are extremely rare. They had to settle for the next best thing and use the feces of various ferocious beasts to boil new medicine. In addition to the dragon dung potion, it also got a second name, gold juice potion. This is unpopular along the coast of the Old World, but on overseas routes, high-quality dragon dung potions are a necessity. It can scare off all kinds of elusive sea monsters, or at least force them out of the water, giving surface ships a chance to engage in a head-on battle. Boo! The moment the cork was opened, the strong pungent smell that permeated the air was so strong that Byron, who was standing high on the mast, could not help but cover his nose. The liquid medicine dissolved quickly after being poured into the water, dyeing the nearby murky sea water into an indescribable yellow-green color. The school of red fish that had been charging straight at Violet under the control of the bone whistle immediately turned around and circumvented the nemesis as if it had encountered a natural enemy. As for the other pirate ships nearby, at this time, how could Redbeard care about the life and death of others instead of his own death? apparently, most of the other big pirates around had not made such targeted preparations, and they were shouting, "Full rudder, get out of the way!" while mobilizing the abilities of each of them as a third-level transcendent to resist the school of fish. The cemetery sequence motto, "Give all things rest in peace." Fear Aura. Hall of Fame, various artists, motto, "Humans can accomplish great things." Fantasy Heart Sound. The extraordinary system of Ladder of Glory believes that, the human race is supreme and glory belongs to the collective. The entire human society, religions, countries, nations, guilds, societies, from top to bottom, all organizations are put into a tight network. Theocracy is above. King's power is in the middle. All industries are below. Every profession is an essential part of the functioning of society. As long as you reach the middle sequence, you will be a well-known middle-level figure in the organization and you can get ahead anywhere. Among pirates, he is a big pirate who controls an independent fleet. Among knights, he is a knight commander who can command a team of knights. Just because you change your place of residence, you won't suddenly fall to the bottom of society and have to start all over again, repeating the cycle over and over again. As a result, they have a sufficiently stable anchor. The extraordinary power is truly manifested in them, and a core ability of a system or tactical level emerges. In particular, the conductor Ferdinand, Chapter 38, who was driving the beast cage, was most capable in this situation. In his hand he held an old cast-iron camel bell used by ancient caravans. After shaking it once, the leading fish began to slow down. After shaking it twice, their bodies became stiff on the sea surface. After shaking it 3 times, a part of the fish even began to turn around. This is one of the systematic abilities of the third-level beast tamer, group monster immobilization and group monster domination. But his power alone cannot control the entire battlefield that spans several kilometers. Just when the school of fish was about to reverse, Violet knew all of her opponent's occupations, but there was no surprise on her face. He slowly stretched out his slender white right hand and snapped his fingers at the school of fish that was already very close to the enemy ship. Boom! The orange-red flames shot up into the sky like a volcanic eruption, and the hot shock wave sent huge amounts of sea water into the sky. A heavy scalding rain fell over the entire battlefield. The sea water was boiling, and it seemed as if the entire atrium was shaking violently in the aftermath of the explosion. The enemy ships that were the focus of special attention were suddenly lifted out of the water by the huge underwater shock wave. One of the ships almost fell apart as it crashed back into the sea, and countless pirates were thrown into the raging waves. He was drowned while fainting. The morale of the fleet completely collapsed at this point, and those who survived immediately turned around and ran away. In fact, Redbeard's actions were exactly what Violet and Byron wanted. The fragile alliance that had been maintained by interests had lost its last bit of spirit due to this wave of the greatest art, and no longer cared about interests. They believed that as long as they escaped, the Wanman fleet would definitely not chase them with all its might. "Ms. Violet, we withdraw from the competition for the position of Overseer, no longer support Edward the Redbeard, and give up all interests in Anchor Bay. Redbeard has committed a heinous crime by colluding with the kingdom. I, Butcher Bird, declare that I will cut all ties with him and no longer have any relationship with him. From now on, I will support Her Royal Highness the Princess." "Me too." Those cunning pirates showed weakness, left a few words, and fled for their lives without any loyalty. Byron and Violet had not intended to kill them all. First, if all of Redbeard's followers died, who would take the blame when they encountered the natural disaster that attacked from dreams? Second, it's because of poverty. War is about money. Kiss of Flame. This alchemical formula is powerful and easy to control, but its only drawback is that it is expensive. Cultivating these thousands of fish bombs is more expensive than equipping dozens of large-caliber artillery pieces, and is almost equivalent to the same weight of silver. Violet no longer had enough financial resources to launch a second attack. Byron looked at the big pirates who were completely defeated in the head-on fleet battle. There was a gleam in his eyes. It was obvious that the huge battle in which he had stirred up the world as a commander had made him make great progress on his extraordinary path. As long as you have money, you can quickly advance to the Gold and Yuan sequence, Chapter 13, and Storm Night and other sequences are no exception. Resources do not only refer to potions, spices, and knowledge, but also training opportunities that fit this career path. Even if Lancaster had not yet been destroyed, it would be unlikely that the command of a war of this magnitude would be handed over to a rookie like him. Another great victory of the battle line versus traditional tactics. Perhaps due to the limited power of artillery, battle lines are not yet the mainstream of warfare. But in the future, if the main battle line does not appear, it will be a final gamble that will determine the country's destiny and maritime hegemony for decades or even hundreds of years to come. Although even in the entire maritime history of my previous life, such battles of national destiny were rare. But the number of warships owned by each country is itself the greatest deterrent. More means stronger, bigger means more beautiful, and if both more and bigger are available, then you will dominate the sea. It's a pity that I don't know when I will have the chance to try my skills again. If it weren't for his lack of spirituality, the storm he just mastered would be enough to serve as a promotion ceremony for a storm knight in the middle sequence of impact. At this time, the Redbeard fleet lost its deterrent power, and the pirate ships of the small pirates in the outer privateering fleet also scattered. The collective coffins of the heroes immediately surrounded the lonely Vengeance again. Byron handed the command of the battlefield back to Violet, a genuine third-level craftsman. Raise the bloody flag, and leave no one alive. Tooth for tooth, blood for blood. Roar. Chapter 84. How can a bayonet be such an inconvenient thing? Several pirate ships on the Bay People's side broke up their battle line, hit the steering wheels hard, and rammed into the Nemesis, which could no longer escape due to its limited speed. They did not launch any more artillery fire. Because the people of Taiwan now have an absolute advantage in combat power, the priority is no longer to defeat the enemy, but to not let the immortal Redbeard escape in the chaos. If they couldn't bury this monster with their own hands, they wouldn't be able to sleep well. Only. At this time, Redbeard, who seemed to have been deserted by his friends and relatives, did not sit still and wait for death. He knew he still had one last chance to turn the tables. He personally gripped the steering wheel, and the Nemesis, whose crew had suffered heavy losses, suddenly turned. It dragged many Bay citizens' heroic spirits who had rushed onto the ship from the windward side and collided with the smaller Flaming Rose. Damn woman, I'm going to break your neck. The fighting between the contestants is just an interlude. Don't forget that the treasure hunt competition is still in progress. As long as one of the two candidates dies and loses, the other party can successfully withdraw from Valhalla even if he has not found the great treasure. At least it can save his life. In the era of Karux, naval warfare was also called naval siege warfare. Compared with the fourth-level ships, the third-level ships have taller bulwarks, just like towering city walls, and their high-altitude boarding does give them certain advantages. Musketeers, fire! Thick smoke suddenly rose. Boom! 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 After a burst of musket fire from the crews of both sides, the sharp blades collided fiercely. After a fierce naval battle, about one-third of Redbeard's 680 crew members were lost, and they could no longer crush Violet's 350 men. Redbeard jumped onto the Flaming Rose and, relying on his immortality, ignored the attacks from ordinary crew members. He led his most elite captain's guards and charged straight towards Violet on the rear deck. With a roar, he called out the pirate's motto. It is better to take by force than to work hard. A spiritual glow visible to the naked eye burst out, and a translucent blood-red pirate flag unfolded above his head. The emblem above is clearly visible. It is the flag of the goddess of vengeance. The battle flag fluttered in the wind, casting a blood-red aura that enveloped every elite pirate around Redbeard, connecting them tightly together. In an instant, the team in a triangle formation became an unbreakable whole. Especially the Redbeard who served as the arrow, the blood on his body was particularly thick. Wielding a heavy crescent-shaped scimitar, he charged forward like a mad rhinoceros, unstoppable. The Pirate of the Lighthouse sequence obtains 3 abilities at the First Order Squire level: Weapon Mastery, Mountain Goat Footsteps, and Blind Fighting Expert. When they reach the second level professional level, they can at least serve as pirate officers, and most of them already have their own pirate ships and become captains. Among all the current sequences, the pirate ship representing the Lighthouse sequence is undoubtedly the one that attaches the most importance to teamwork. Therefore, the core ability they obtained is called Pirate Flag: it can focus the spirituality of the pirates under one's command under the same Pirate 10 Commandments. The more strictly the crew members abide by the 10 Commandments, the more tacitly they cooperate, and the stronger their own strength, the greater the increase the captain will eventually obtain. The upper limit at the second stage is 10 people, and at the third stage it will increase to 100 people, so I can gather everyone's strength for my benefit. In a group fight, only the knight commanders can defeat them. Violet had no time to feel sorry for the Flaming Rose, which had suddenly become the main battlefield, and immediately ordered all the crew members around to get out of the way so as not to die in vain. He slapped the traveler's bag on his waist and took out 2 peculiarly shaped 3-barreled muskets, one black and one white. Pirate flag is a stacking of manpower, and it is indeed difficult to find an opponent on the same track. But the biggest difference between humans and animals is that humans can use tools. Boom! Boom! Aim at Redbeard and shoot twice. This thing looked like a gun, but the roar was like an artillery fire. Just 2 shots, one in front and one behind, pierced through the blood-colored aura on Redbeard's body. Even though he swung his knife in time to block most of the steel balls, he was still knocked back 2 steps and had 5 or 6 bullet holes on his body. Rare item gun pipe organ black and white keys: it was made by Violet herself using the core ability of a 3rd-level craftsman, alchemy, and was inspired by the king of musical instruments, the organ. Although not as exaggerated as hundreds of barrels, both guns have 3 barrels each, one black and one white, like the black and white keys of an organ. The barrel is 470 mm long and weighs 3.72 kg, 8.2 pounds. It fires shotgun shells made of tiny steel balls with an effective range of 60 meters. It can kill a mad brown bear with 1 shot. You can choose to fire a single shot or 3 shots at once, and the power is amazing. There are many branches of craftsmen in the tower sequence. Little Hans, the carpenter on the Golden Hind, wanted to specialize in being a shipmaker, while Violet specialized in various gunpowder and hot weapons, and could be called a gunsmith. Carrying a mobile arsenal with him. Damn it! Give me your life. Redbeard saw that the surrounding Bay People pirates were rushing to support him, and he knew that he didn't have much time left. He immediately broke away from his captain's guard, stomped his feet to the ground, and exploded with a huge force that almost collapsed the deck. It swooped down towards Violet like a meteor. The body is as light as a swallow. Violet's melee ability was not worth mentioning, but her equipment was luxurious enough. She uttered a sentence of judgment. The wonderful boots, wings of the petrel on her feet grew 2 pairs of small wings, allowing her to fly backwards as nimbly as a petrel. The criss-crossing sails, the cannons on the open deck, and the gunpowder barrels did not pose any hindrance to her. At the same time, he did not forget to shoot at Redbeard continuously. The lines of fire intertwined and danced gracefully. Violet is indeed a top student who studies classical dance at the Vinaya Academy of Arts. She turned the thrilling battle into a luxurious ball. A purple aura burst out from his body. The 3rd-level core ability alchemy allows her to easily control the warship under her feet to change its material form and slow down Redbeard's steps. The ropes from the yards drooped like snakes, the rivets on the deck jumped up of their own accord, and even a barrel of rum came staggering over to give him a good blow. The spiritual light and flesh on Redbeard's body were constantly being smashed, but he continued to advance without flinching. Facing this kind of enemy that can never be killed is simply despairing. But if the Taiwanese side has gained such a big advantage in the early stage and still allows this guy to make a comeback, it would be better for them to jump into the sea and commit suicide together. It only took a dozen seconds. The captain of the Chongfeng arrived first. Like Redbeard, he is a 3rd-level pirate in the lighthouse sequence and has also activated his own pirate flag. Clang, scimitar in hand, he rushed to Redbeard like a whirlwind and knocked him back half a step with 1 blow. Violet also took this opportunity to reload her ammunition and recited the cutting inscription of the black and white keys, which was also the name of a piano piece, Sonata of Sorrow. The organ's double guns and triple barrels fired a critical hit, blasting a bloody hole in Redbeard's chest. Seeing that the battle was getting out of hand, Redbeard and 4 other pirates, regardless of the difficulty the warships could get close to, grabbed a rope and leapt over several ships, quickly closing in. I finally realized that my situation was hopeless. Looking back at the goddess of vengeance behind her, she had already been overwhelmed by the souls of the Bay People who outnumbered her by several times, and there were only a few remaining sounds of resistance. No, I have to escape. I am still immortal. As long as they can't catch me, they will find a way to end the treasure hunt competition sooner or later. At that time, I would definitely be able to take the opportunity to escape with them. As long as I am alive, the ship can be rebuilt, the sailors can be recruited again, and one day I will be able to make a comeback. Immortality is my greatest support, they can't stop me at all. Redbeard is more afraid of death than ordinary people. Otherwise, he would not choose to learn the black magic with huge cost like soul-hiding life box. Thinking of this, Redbeard used his body-damaging explosive ability Boiling Blood to force back the siege of the 2 big pirates. Abandoning the first mate Badger Harvey and the captain's guards who were already surrounded, blood-red light exploded under his feet, and he used the bulwarks and masts for leverage. With one last mountain goat step, he jumped back onto the tall stern deck of the Nemesis. Just keep jumping into the big waves on the north side without stopping. With the third-level ships as the boundary, the leeward side is full of the ships of the Bay People's pirates, while the upwind side is filled with the old antiques of the heroic spirits. If he jumps from here, once he enters the water, no one will be able to find him again. But at this moment, an anxious voice sounded in his ears. "Captain, here. The Nemesis is finished, come to my ship, and we will retreat quickly." When Redbeard turned his head, he saw that his most loyal executioner Bill had actually summoned back the arrow-speedy golden deer. They attacked from the windward side, which had been occupied by the coffins of the Bay People's boats. He was standing on the rear deck, waving at him from afar. Redbeard, who had already decided to jump into the water to escape, was overjoyed. He had seen with his own eyes how fast this ship was. Wouldn't it be easy for him to escape from the encirclement of the Bay People as long as he boarded it, although he is immortal, if he falls into the deep sea where a storm is about to come? You will soon experience a hellish death package of drowning, resurrection, drowning, and resurrection. Why die when you can live? Redbeard exerted force on his feet and jumped high from the stern towards the golden deer. When I was in mid-air, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. At this critical moment of life and death, the others would have already run away without a trace. Bill actually thought of taking me, the captain, with him. Loyalty is indeed the first priority. It just so happens that the first mate Harvey is no longer with us, so when I requisition the clipper boat that Bill is driving, I will arrange for him to be my first mate. Hey? What is he doing? However, the 32-pound main gun on the rear deck of the Golden Deer was raised in firing angle by two gunners using a crowbar under the command of Bill. Just when Redbeard's leap reached its highest point, Bill maintained his usual respectful smile on his face, but firmly pointed the flintlock in his hand at the propellant pool of the carronade. Redbeard's eyes popped out of their sockets in disbelief. "No, no, no. Boom, what's even worse is..." At the moment Byron fired, Phantom Blade Guts blindfolded himself, turned around twice, and shot a flying knife at his beloved captain. Chapter 85, The Punishment That Is Hard to Describe. Fire flashes. In an instant, the sky and the ground were filled with fluttering red beards. The throwing knife shot by Guts accidentally missed the target and flew past Byron's body. What did I say? Leaping into the air before a fight and giving up the ability to dodge is the absolute worst taboo. Why don't you guys listen? By the way, no one has stipulated that you can't use the battleship's main gun when backstabbing, right? Byron made an awning with his hands. Looking at his captain, who was torn into pieces by 500 bullets, the largest part of his body was rolled away by an activated rope. He quickly removed Bill's cognitive correction, drank a glass of flying grasshopper, and took a handful of grilled squid tentacles handed to him by Brooke. Activate mountain goat footsteps and follow along. In the chaotic battlefield, there was a third-level ship Vengeance that was submerged by heroic spirits. Few people on the Bay People's side, who were at a disadvantage, noticed why Redbeard Edward, who was fleeing for his life, suddenly exploded in mid-air. But several big pirates on the Taiwan side saw it clearly. Seeing Byron, who had a pair of blue eyes and was obviously of Taiwanese descent, coming on board, he quickly ordered his men not to attack. It is only affected by cognition modification and storm seal ring. Although they felt that the young man seemed familiar, they could not match him with any identity in their memory. Good citizen. Miss Artist. Violet, dressed in women's clothing, had already pushed aside the elders with strange looks and came forward enthusiastically. This was the first time the two met in their true identities. Although Byron was unwilling to take risks due to his personality, he still kept the last layer of disguise. After working hard and finally achieving their plan perfectly, the Orphan Alliance smiled at each other and saluted each other. Violet's ladylike manners were elegant and proper, but Byron, who was holding a handful of grilled squid in his hand, had nothing to do with elegance. He drank 3 cups of blood wine today, which was really a bit too much. The side effects gradually became uncontrollable, and I had to eat a few more skewers of squid to calm myself down. Come on, we should send this monster off for good. Violet took Byron's hand and walked to the remains of Redbeard. Redbeard's bad luck today was not only to ward off disaster for Byron, but also a test for their resurrection rules of the soul hidden life box. I've seen him die and come back to life so many times. It has been confirmed using the strange item two-sided dice that the effect of this black magic will only affect the largest piece of corpse. The sea outside was full of red beards, but only the one in front of him retained most of his spine and half of his skull. It is also the key to his resurrection. Moreover, after being backstabbed by Byron this time, Redbeard's recovery speed was much slower than at the beginning, not even 1/10 of his previous speed. This gave them the leisure to chat here. Effect of confidant: the better your abilities and achievements, the more you will be valued and recognized by your superiors, and the closer you will be to the role of confidant in the eyes of others. The more you backstab a superior, the stronger the ability bonus you gain. Moreover, they are the inferiors who are against the superiors and are not subject to the laws and punishments within the system. The image of Bill the Henchman is far more popular than the previous chef and has a wider impact. The additional bonus obtained on the basis of the 32-pound carronade is naturally stronger. More importantly, this was different from the attack that the big pirates launched on Redbeard. It was not a physical or energy attack in the conventional sense. It is a special ability at the rule level, which can be called true damage. Is your stuff ready? Making sure they had enough time, Byron gave 2 skewers of squid to Violet, and the two of them talked while eating. The latter naturally took a bite, and praised it for its good taste. Then he looked into Byron's eyes and answered excitedly. Although the spell-breaking stone cannot be processed using supernatural powers, we have used the most clumsy hydraulic labor to make it according to your requirements. The craftsmanship is absolutely impeccable. As he spoke, he patted the traveler's bag on his waist and took out a strange-looking thing. It was a stone cabinet nearly 1 meter tall, with the main body formed into a human shape by hinges, a large number of nails and 2 door covers. The 2 doors on the front, covered with long stone spikes, were open, revealing a small space inside that was only half a person's height at most. There is no doubt that this is an Iron Maiden made of spell-breaking stone. It is also a famous cruel torture device in the countries of the Old World. If a prisoner was placed in the hollow inside the Iron Maiden and the door was closed tightly, the nails on the door would pierce his entire body. Unless your body is as soft as an octopus, there is absolutely no room for survival. Moreover, the material used to make the Iron Maiden is very special. Whether it is the power of the Silver Law or the Pirate Code, or even one's own spirituality, all will be blocked by the law-breaking stone. Any extraordinary abilities, including black magic, cannot be stimulated, and the extraordinary person trapped inside is just a relatively strong ordinary person. Not bad, not bad, you are worthy of being a third-level craftsman. It looks exactly like the one in my design. I am very satisfied, but I don't know if our Mr. Redbeard is satisfied with this new home. Byron and Violet looked down at the tattered corpse on the ground, with the same malicious look on their faces. GG. I can only say that it is really difficult to go against a cruel and ruthless guy like Byron. Redbeard seemed to sense a grave crisis as well, and the wreckage began to move faster and faster. A bloodshot eye had appeared in the empty eye socket, staring at the young man and woman standing in front of him. Crazy ambition, deep hatred, endless resentment, and blind regret, the extreme emotions gushing out of his pupils seemed to turn into flames and burn them all to ashes. But he had no chance when he was alive, and even less so now. Byron kicked his corpse into the narrow space of the Iron Maiden. He slammed the cabinet door shut, causing the spikes of the spell-breaking stone on it to pierce his tattered body from all directions once again. Then he locked it with 7 heavy locks also made of spell-breaking stone. Next, as soon as Redbeard recovered, he would be stabbed to death by the thorns again, then resurrected, and stabbed to death again. Always keep him in a state of death. Moreover, his immortality is not absolute or eternal. Soul Hidden Life Box A blood sacrifice needs to be held every year, and the number of people is not 1 or 2, but doubles every year. Theoretically, all he had to do was lock him up in a place where he could never get out and not allow him to perform the ceremony for the next year. In the end, it will naturally disappear completely. Of course, if you want to prevent all accidents in the coming year, it is not enough to rely solely on an Iron Maiden who can break the magic stone. They also don't have the energy to keep an eye on this guy all the time. Byron took off the whale oil lantern that had been hanging from his waist. He lit the wick with a tinderbox, and a faint green light shone straight out through the eye on the crystal lampshade. A huge portal leading to the 3rd level, the Kingdom of Night, opened on the sea. The information left by the whale hunter said that the Kingdom of Night is a real place of sleep. Anyone who enters it will feel extremely sleepy, and once they fall asleep, they will never wake up again. You must use strong willpower to suppress your sleepiness and find the entrance to the next level before falling asleep. Go away. Byron and Violet worked together to lift the heavy stone Iron Maiden and threw it far into the kingdom of night on the 3rd floor. With a plop it sank to the bottom of the sea. As long as Violet didn't say anything, no one could go in and rescue him. They didn't know when Redbeard last performed a blood sacrifice. Next, for a few months at the shortest and a year at the longest, he would be torn between two options of death, being nailed to death or being drowned in the sea. There is no liberation until one dies completely. It won't be a pleasant experience anyway. Perhaps because of the presence of Princess Violet, the Taiwanese, the heroic spirits that destroyed the Nemesis did not launch another attack and retreated on their own. A great war ended here. At this time, dong 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 dot, a strange sound suddenly sounded on the boat. Byron turned his head and saw that his own man-eating shark had picked up the strange black object echo conch from the sea while eating and drinking, and was gently knocking the side of the boat with its head. He reached out and took it and put it to his ear, and heard several echoes from the past period of time. The Channel Fleet has arrived 10 nautical miles outside Iron Anchor Bay. Redbeard, the agreed time is almost here, why didn't you reply immediately? It's now 15 minutes past the agreed time, where are you? Didn't you boast that the position of warlord was within your grasp? Why hasn't the maze of Anchor Bay been opened yet? Useless. Useless. We even helped you kill the Children's Guard, and this is how you repay His Majesty. Losers have no right to make demands. By 3 p.m., the day will be over. Tonight we will directly summon the Scourge to launch a strong attack on Anchor Bay. You will be on your own when the time comes. Although Redbeard's own voice was not retained in the conch, everyone could tell that this was a conversation between him and the York family liaison officer. After hearing the communications, which were becoming more severe each time, and the ultimatum, the expressions on the faces of the pirates became solemn again. Compared to the real enemies outside Anchor Bay, Redbeard is just a mole. At this time, the sun had already set and the natural disaster was imminent. They still had the most difficult hurdle to overcome. The success or failure of your plan depends on this one move. Chapter 86, Tentacles, Tentacles Everywhere. Night falls. The howling sea breeze over the North Sea became increasingly fierce, with the wind speed rapidly rising to a level 32 wind of 7 knots. Huge waves surged up one after another, and the height was close to 3 meters. Common sense would dictate this, in the prelude to an already obvious storm. All sailing ships on the sea, whether they are majestic first-class ships or inconspicuous small sampans, should find a safe harbor and drop anchor early. If anyone dares to continue sailing on the sea, even if all the sails are folded, the mast will be tragically broken. Capsizing and sinking is their only fate. What is strange is that this completely unreasonable thing actually happened on the outskirts of Anchor Bay, which is shrouded in fog all year round. On the sea composed of countless low hills, a huge fleet came, like a crab crawling sideways and sailing against the wind. The eye-catching black background blood cross flag on the mast flutters in the wind. This means that they were the Hastings Strait Fleet that set out from Bristol Port 3 days ago. The largest flagship, the second-class ship King Edward, has moved from the position of the lead ship to the center of the fleet. Dozens of other battleships and cruisers surrounded him, forming a nearly perfect circle. Whenever strong winds and huge waves hit them, their power would be inexplicably reduced by half. As if afraid of something in the fleet, the Hastings Navy was not affected by the storm. No, to be more precise, they were not only unaffected by the storm, but the storm seemed to come from them. It was exactly the same as the sudden storm during the Battle of Red and White Roses in the Strait of Dover. Report. To the commander, Redbeard Edward has completely lost contact. Word had come in a few hours ago that he was trapped in Valhalla during the fighting portion of the overseer election. But he hasn't responded to the new message I sent him 10 minutes ago. I'm afraid he really can't open the maze of Anchor Bay for us as planned. A young officer who looked less than 30 years old came to the command room and reported bad news to the fleet commander, General Norwich York. The commander, who was standing by the glass porthole and looking at the mist outside, showed no anger on his face when he heard this. He just nodded casually. I see. That famous pirate is just a casual move. If it succeeds, that would be the best, but if it doesn't matter. The more elaborate the plan, the greater the chance of error. This is the same principle as when we deal with those weird monsters and evil spirits overseas. Accidents themselves are one of the sources of danger, and we need to prepare early. I hope you remember that tricks can be used, but when accidents occur, the only thing that can really cover us is our own strength. This young officer, who looks 50% similar to Fleet Admiral Norwich, is obviously of a different identity. After hearing the commander's teachings, he still couldn't let it go. He raised a black conch in his hand and said with a painful look on his face. "Father Commander. Before we defeated Lancaster and took the throne, you gave me the task of liaising with Redbeard to plan for Anchor Bay. Over such a long period of time, we have invested too much manpower and material resources in him. This does not include the third-level ship Nemesis that we sold to him at a discount earlier. Just the 10% of the loot from the more than privateers that later joined him and which were handed over to the family maritime court every year was a terrifying figure. If all the money is squandered by Redbeard, the family's financial report next year will be very ugly." Norwich, the fleet commander of the White Rose York family and the commander-in-chief of the operation, waved to his son Norwich Jr. He comforted him earnestly. "My son, the noble York is not like those desperados. The capital we have allows us to pay the cost of trial and error countless times, but they only have one life. As long as we have power and wealth, we can make extraordinary people and talents in all sequences work hard for us. Paying a small fortune and using their lives to prove that the espionage plan is not feasible, and that the strength of the Taiwanese people is beyond expectations, isn't this a very good deal? As long as we kill them all, the money will still be ours. Besides, this sea lacks everything except pirates chasing after wealth and power. Didn't Redbeard send back a list of free pirates? After that, as long as these despicable pirates who intend to surrender to the York family and want to get alms from us are still alive, we can relax the restrictions of the privateering letter and let them become new privateer captains and continue to work for the family." Seeing his young son nod thoughtfully, Norwich patted his shoulder. He glanced at the clock on the table and gave the order to attack. "Okay, at least Redbeard has started the Black Mass ceremony in advance and successfully marked the stubborn residents of Anchor Bay with 30 counterfeit silver coins. Since they have voluntarily given up the option of conversion, let them be completely destroyed. The time has come. Take my warrant and go with the lawyers to activate that thing. In the future, this sea will still belong to you young people. Although you are only a second-level professional lawyer, you must learn how to be independent from now on." Realizing that the time for harvest had finally arrived, little Norwich quickly stood at attention and saluted. "Yes, Commander, I'll pass the order right away." He left the command room and walked down the wooden ladder from the deck hatch to the bottom cabin. The second-class ship King Edward has a displacement of 1,870 tons, a gun deck length of 54.1 meters, and a width of 15.14 meters. It carries 90 guns, including 32 28-pound guns, 18 28-pound guns, and 12 32-pound guns, plus 4 9-pound guns on the open deck, with a crew of 750 people. In addition to the open deck, there are 3 through-deck gun decks below, upper, middle and lower. It is almost a small 3-dimensional fortress. There is a guard post every 3 steps and a sentry every 5 steps along the way. Only the elite soldiers on the ship with the strongest will, the most outstanding strength and the most loyalty to the York family are qualified to come here. Not only that, there was also a solemn and majestic atmosphere in the air. It makes people subconsciously hold their breath, thinking that they have come to a courtroom where a verdict is being pronounced. When a transcendent opens his spiritual vision, he will see that the cabin is filled with a silvery white network of laws. At every corner, there was an illusory golden lion wearing a crown and holding a pure gold scale, staring at the people who came with its eyes as big as copper bells. No one without permission is allowed to enter. The level of security alone is comparable to that of the king's treasury. Little Norwich made his way unimpeded to the lower gun deck, where it was pitch dark and all the gun ports were completely sealed. It is well known that in strong winds and high sea conditions, the gun ports on the leeward side of a battleship would be submerged below the waterline. When sailing, craftsmen must use wooden strips to nail the gun port from the inside of the side and insert the gun port bolt. Then, use the caulking material made of pine oil mixed with hemp to fill the gaps on the 4 sides of the gun port and strictly perform waterproofing work. Even though there was that thing on the King Edward to suppress the wind and waves, the waves outside were still higher than the main gun port. In order to prevent sudden changes in wind direction, they simply sealed all the gun ports on both sides. Preventing the boat from taking on water is one thing, but more importantly, there is a taboo that concerns life and death. Absolutely cannot let that thing soak in sea water. In the bottom cabin, a group of more than a dozen lawyers were closely guarding a box that was sealed with chains and laws. They all wore bright red robes and white wigs, symbolizing the retreat of humanity, and at this moment there was only impartial divinity and judicial justice. At the same time, He held the staff symbolizing punishment and power, and drew on the power of the silver law and the iron law of kingship Magna Carta to weave a legal net, tightly enveloping the box. By integrating the power of the entire fleet, this place has been turned into the kingdom's maritime territory and the place where the royal power rules. But young Norwich knew that the main purpose of the law was to defend against external threats, and its restraint on that thing was minimal. What we really rely on is the leader, a third-level lawyer. Chief Justice Dude Wright pulled out an old shepherd's flute from his waist and nodded to little Norwich. Indicate that you are ready. Open the seal and summon the scourge. The warrant signed by the fleet commander turned to ashes, and the seals on the box were peeled off layer by layer. Everyone clenched the batons in their hands tightly, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Call, as the last seal was opened, thick water vapor carrying a pungent fishy smell that seemed to penetrate into people's bones instantly filled the bottom cabin of the battleship. Inside the box was a large, brightly colored pottery jar. Inside was a pale tentacle as thick as a human thigh, soaked in an unknown potion and looking severely corrupted. But unlike ordinary octopus tentacles, its suction cup is full of ferocious mouthparts. There is no need to use your eyes to see it, it appears the moment it appears. Everyone felt as if something slippery was wriggling back and forth in the grooves of their brains. Inexplicable images, language, and words poured into their eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and any other place where their senses were located. The wooden boards, rivets, cast iron ballast and wine barrels in the corner in the bottom cabin began to twist and transform into the tentacles of some oversized mollusk. In the middle of the bumpy suction cups grew a drooling mouth and teeth, which surged towards the lawyers in the cabin like a tide. Boom! The lawyers closed their eyes and slammed the staffs in their hands down to their feet. A magic circle carved on the ground using some forbidden knowledge suddenly lit up, forming a shape resembling a compass. One of the blood-red pointers slowly turned and finally pointed in the direction of Anchor Bay 10 nautical miles, 18.5 kilometers, away. The tentacles also paused. Don't remember what it looks like, don't receive the information it spreads, and don't explore its source. As long as we are not marked, it will not actively attack us. The Chief Justice's majestic voice sounded, slightly dispelling the tension in everyone's hearts. Toot toot. Suddenly, a chaotic and annoying flute sound was heard. Dude Wright blew the second-level relic, Pied Piper's shepherd's flute in his hand. Magically, at the sound of the flute, those phantom tentacles swayed slightly like snakes, then disappeared in an instant and appeared outside the battleship. The dark clouds in the sky and the waves in the sea seemed to be affected by it, taking on indescribable shapes. After determining the direction according to the compass array, it suddenly disappeared into the void. Chapter 87. Wild Hunt, the Scourge. Time moves forward slightly to the atrium on the second floor of Valhalla. Although Redbeard was in an uncertain state of being drowned or nailed to death, he was dead after all. The Pirate Code, which presided over the election of the overseers, responded immediately. The ancient voice was mechanical and stiff without any ripples. Candidate number 1, Edward Redbeard, has been confirmed dead. Candidate number 2, Violet, can choose to continue the Great Treasure Trial or withdraw from Valhalla. If you continue the trial, you can gain full warlord authority after finding the Great Secret Treasure. If you quit at this point, as the only candidate you can automatically take up the position of acting overseer. The term of office will last until a majority of the members call for a by-election, or until the next election 3 years later. Violet answered without hesitation. I choose to leave Valhalla immediately. Since her main goal had been accomplished, she did not have the leisure to explore the remaining 7 secret levels. As you wish. Next moment. Whether on the first or second floor, all the living people on both sides of the enemy in Valhalla were sent out. The Nemesis, whose entire crew had already died, fully met the conditions for sinking along with the ship. It stands to reason that it would stay here and become a new ship coffin occupied by the heroic spirits of the Bay people, and would also become the nightmare of all subsequent treasure hunters. But Violet was quick to act and ordered more than 100 crew members under her command to start it up again and return to Anchor Bay with the main force. This is a third-level battleship that is mostly intact. Even though they knew there was a test waiting for them, a group of third-level pirates couldn't help but feel jealous when looking at this behemoth. Of course, the preparations in the defense plan had already been completed, and there wasn't much they could do now. Are we going to rush out and use pirate ships to attack the other side's straight fleet, just wait for the other party to attack? Why was Redbeard able to sit firmly on the throne of Vice Speaker before he exposed his immortality? Wasn't it because of this pirate ship? You have to know that a third-level ship that achieves a perfect balance of speed, firepower, and cost requires the felling of more than 2,000 high-quality oak trees planted on the Channel Islands 100 years ago for wood alone. It took another 6 years to build. And these oaks must be high-quality wood planted on private estates, along rivers, and along roadsides. Only those oak trees that fully enjoy rain and sunshine and slowly grow to 100 years old and reach a height of more than 20 meters can produce a section of wood in the trunk that can be used to build the ribs of a warship. The construction cost of a third-level ship at the Kingdom shipyard alone was a staggering 40,000 gold pounds. If an outsider wants to get it, even if he has strong connections, he would have to double the price on this basis to have a chance of getting such a big treasure. Not to mention the powerful bow on top that looks like the goddess of vengeance. It's entirely conceivable. Even for a country, to build a battleship fleet of this level, how much thick wood is needed, how long is the growth cycle, and how staggering is the purchase price. Therefore, it is no exaggeration to say that the outcome of a large-scale naval battle is enough to affect the destiny of a country. If the national treasure, which is the most important asset of the country, is destroyed, it will be impossible to replenish it quickly even if we have a lot of money. It is no wonder that Norwich feels heartbroken that their investment has gone to waste. Byron, who aspires to set up a pirate fleet or even a military dispatch company, is naturally no exception. It's a pity that driving this thing out would really incur hatred, and my weak arms and legs as a first-level attendant simply can't bear it. And it's not in line with my low-key nature. I'm not greedy at all. Slurp. Byron moved his eyes away with difficulty and closed his mouth tightly, finally stopping the saliva from flowing out from the corners of his mouth. At this moment, Violet waved her hand, and the thick mast of the flaming rose turned, and several thick ropes stretched out flexibly like tentacles. He acted as a crane and pulled the figurehead of the third-level ship, the goddess of vengeance, down from under the bowsprit. Then it was placed in front of Byron. Looking at his dazed look, the girl smiled playfully. "It is yours, good citizen. It is yours. Isn't this not good?" Byron finally couldn't help swallowing. Feeling the playful looks from the pirates around him, he suddenly felt a thorn in his side. But Violet waved her hand proudly, the racial motto of the Taiwanese people, "Revenge is inevitable. But we also believe that a favor must be repaid, which is completely different from the remit people who always repay kindness with enmity and take advantage of their benefactors. Without you, the Wild Hunt, we wouldn't even be able to get past Red Beard, let alone the following natural disaster. Don't worry, I, a third-level craftsman, will modify it for you, retaining its main functions while making sure no one else can recognize it." Wild Hunt. The big pirates around had been wondering about the origins of this guy who killed Redbeard and seemed to have some secret relationship with their princess. When I heard this title that has become very well known recently, I suddenly connected many things that I had not understood before. They were responsible for clearing out the dungeons and bringing down the free pirates, trading companies, and major groups. Naturally, he understood the role of the Wild Hunt in this plan. Moreover, his contribution in dealing with Redbeard alone was enough to make him worthy of this figurehead, and now there was no objection. Byron turned his head and saw Violet blinking her bright eyes at him. She realized that this was a way for her to improve her reputation among several trusted pirates. It was just a brief taste, and there was a layer of Wild Hunt vest in between. Byron Lancaster's true identity was a little secret between the two of them. Byron had originally planned to establish good relations with the largest pirate force in the old continent, and was also happy to make friends with these high-ranking Taiwanese citizens who had fought side by side against a common enemy. She nodded to them and accepted Violet's gift generously. "Then I will be very sorry to refuse, Miss Artist." Not only that. Suddenly, Byron heard a distant bell ringing 3 times in a row. This is not an illusion. Rather, he had already reached the legendary level of 19, Chapter 73, and finally reached the critical value of 20 at this moment, gaining recognition from the Silver Law. Just like the invincible body of the Child Guard, he possesses an extraordinary ability that belongs to him alone. The Wild Hunt. Legend has it that the Wild Hunt is never just one person, but a legion. They were led by the king of the Wild Hunt, riding black war horses, appearing in groups, fully armed and holding long swords carrying lightning storms. Anything that stands in their way will be completely destroyed, no matter what it is. Bringing storm, war, and death wherever he goes. Effect: every enemy you kill will have a bit of their spirituality stripped away, turning into a ghost and joining the Wild Hunt Legion you lead. The stronger he was during his lifetime, the greater the fear you caused him, and the greater the bonus he would give you after his death. The current limit is 20 people. If you sacrifice the entire Wild Hunt Legion at one time, you can summon a ghost horse and a full set of Wild Hunt armor, and transform into a mythical Wild Hunt Knight. It is as easy as walking on flat ground on the sea, and killing enemies of higher levels is not a problem. As the legend and influence increase, the power of the title can continue to increase. The next upgrade requires the legend level to reach 25 points. The power of Silver Law came out of nowhere and was injected into Byron's shadow. The barking of two hounds also rang out in his heart, one loud and one dark. They were the pets of the king of the Wild Hunt in the legend, specifically designed to give him warnings and clear the way for him. Compared to the second-tier pirates' pirate flag, which can concentrate the power of their subordinates, each has its own advantages. It takes actual combat to test the amplification effect. Killing enemies will make you stronger, which is in perfect harmony with Storm Knight and my future pirate career. The combination may bring unexpected changes. In addition to mountain goat footsteps, swordsmanship mastery, and riding, Byron truly obtained the first sequence of extraordinary offensive abilities, which made him even more excited than obtaining the figurehead. I can't wait to kill an enemy to try my hand. At this moment, the alarm bell on the island suddenly sounded. That was the pirate code that had shrouded this place for 1,000 years, warning the people of the bay. Immediately, the white fog that shrouded Anchor Bay all year round began to roll violently, as if some huge monster was moving through it. Everyone suddenly turned their heads and looked towards the south. A third-rank navigator among the Bay People's pirates, who was also the leader of all the gatekeepers of Anchor Bay, changed his expression. His eyes suddenly became empty and distant, as if he had seen something that even psychic vision could not see, and he said to Violet hurriedly, "Your Highness, the outer maze of the spiritual level of Anchor Bay has been breached. The second and third floors, the law can't stop it at all, so fast, that thing is coming in." Then, a month later, Byron heard the same annoying and chaotic flute music again, Chapter 2. And a horrible stench that lingers. It was as if I was back in that nightmarish stormy night. Yes, that's it. He clenched his fists, veins popping out on the back of his hands, and it took all his strength to suppress the mindless urge to draw his gun and shoot. Violet, the only one who knew Byron's true identity and his past, immediately noticed his abnormality. She walked straight up to him and held his hand tightly. No meaningless words of comfort were offered, but the firm stance with this last Lancaster was evident. "Isn't it natural for the Orphans Alliance to stick together for support?" Byron opened his eyes wide, staring at a messy shadow in the sea in front of him. 1 second, 2 seconds. The shadow that had been extending steadily towards the Bay residents' community seemed to freeze for a moment. Suddenly, it ran around like a headless fly, covering the entire Anchor Bay in an instant. Pull suddenly. Yes, no pulling. Chapter 88, Fishing failed and got caught. At this moment, Byron, standing on the bow of the Flaming Rose, staring at a large black shadow on the seabed, did not feel the despair and powerlessness like last time. As it dragged, my brain felt slightly dizzy and then I immediately regained consciousness. There is no question of committing suicide or suffering severe damage to consciousness due to attacks launched by natural disasters in dreams. On the contrary, I feel very at ease from the bottom of my heart. It was as if before the storm came, the ship had already dropped anchor in the safe harbor and provided a safe haven. Looking back at the other mortal pirates around him, he found that the most seriously injured one just had his head drooped, as if he had accidentally dozed off. It only took a few breaths for him to regain consciousness. Although the residential areas of the Bay Area residents further away could not be seen, judging from the fact that the commotion was quickly quelled, those civilians should not be in any serious trouble. It's really blocked. Even though Byron was very confident in his heart, he didn't finally breathe a sigh of relief until he confirmed the results of the battle. Now that the first amulet has taken effect, there is no need to bother with the second amulet, Redbeard who is about to die, and the third amulet, use the term history corrector to extract the holy relic. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something. He immediately sank into a state of deep meditation and returned to his own lighthouse in the spiritual world. The huge lighthouse nearby that was dragged into the Black Sea last time now only has a lonely base left, proving that the Child Guardians once existed. Behind Byron was still the vast archipelago and continent consisting of countless islands, which was covered by the Silver Law. Just like the Mediterranean Sea, they are surrounded by clear water. There are countless dense spots of light in the water, representing the countless mortals in the entire human race who have not achieved spiritual sublimation. It was there that Byron had transcended the mundane world a month earlier. On the coastlines on both sides, there are lighthouses that look like stars. The lights they emitted illuminated the dark sea nearby. Here Byron clearly saw that a large shadow like seaweed suddenly emerged from the bottom of the water, tightly entangling countless lighthouses, towers, and even islands around it, including his own lighthouse. That belongs to the Bay Pirates, civilians, all pirate groups and bounty hunters in the entire North Sea. Slaves from all over the world, black market merchants of all sizes, legal and illegal trading companies, various organizations, spies from multiple countries, black gloves, and most importantly, there is Valhalla, the place where the people of the bay come from and where they return to, and perhaps the thickest anchor in the world. It looks like just a small anchor bay. But this is the center of the entire old world's black market trade, and the various groups stationed here are definitely numerous and diverse enough. It is not an exaggeration to say that it symbolizes the gray area of the entire North Sea region. If everyone is marked, it is the same as if no one is marked. The natural disaster was at a loss as to what to do and even dared to put the entire island anchored by Valhalla into its mouth, but accidentally kicked the iron wall. Byron is no longer alone. He is not alone. In front of him, the black shadow made another powerful pulling motion. Second pull. No pull. Pull again. Still no movement. I can't pull it. I can't pull it at all. That natural disaster was completely devoid of the ease and unstoppable force that had destroyed the entire Lancaster family and killed Dennis the child guard. At this point, Byron finally put his heart at ease. The scene before him also confirmed one of his guesses. From my perspective, the foundation of the Silver Law is essentially the collective subconscious of the entire human race. This world is filled with violent, chaotic, and unknown dangerous tides of source energy that are pouring in from the spiritual world. Chapter 17. Outside the known world, there is no telling how many dark creatures, fallen ones, evil spirits, and extremely evil weirdnesses are hidden. Regardless of whether the Silver Law was built by the Creator or not, it connects the spirituality of all human beings from ancient times to the present, forming a spiritual dam that protects the entire human race. Moreover, every collective among human beings, religion, country, nation, guild, society, will automatically form a local area network, forming an archipelago or a landmass in the spiritual world. Then the big net is used to trap the small net, trying to stabilize every individual in this dangerous world. Lancaster may be strong enough, but not only can it not force the people of Hastings to obey the law, but also the House of York has taken away some of the power. In addition, his uncle's mental state was worrying, and he was on and off the Magna Carta. When the disease broke out, his family was at most the size of a top aristocratic family. It's nothing compared to the whole of Anchor Bay. After witnessing with his own eyes how natural disasters operate in the spiritual world, Byron also gained a new understanding of the strange decree issued by the Church. All believers can only choose one name for their children from the 65 male names and 48 female names in the Gospel of Creation. It is strictly forbidden to choose any other name. Behind every seemingly outrageous regulation, there must be an even more outrageous reason. This shows that the church leaders were aware of this problem a long time ago, and the entire society was trying to find ways to strengthen this collective concept. After all people with the same name can be considered another form of collective. Even the most powerful evil spirit cannot successfully curse anyone if it only has a name. Just like if the deadly poison of nostril was dropped into the sea, it would not kill any shrimp. Perhaps that existence beyond the specifications is still invincible, and human individuals are still insignificant in front of it. But when Byron found a way to cope with the situation from the experience of his predecessors, he saw the possibility of conquering the unknown and was no longer worried. Soon, his consciousness returned to the real world. I discovered that the unknown existence did not back down, and refused to let go even after biting something it could not swallow. It's like it has no self-awareness or normal mind of a living being and only acts according to instinct. Your Highness, gentlemen, I think you should take a look at this. The third-rank navigator spoke again, and raised the whale oil pilot lantern in his hand, casting a warm light in front of everyone. The appearance outside the maze emerged in the light. Is that the Strait Fleet? However, among the layers of huge waves, a huge second-class battleship was leading the way, rushing straight towards the Anchor Bay in a completely involuntary manner. Behind him were dozens of warships of all sizes. If you turn on clairvoyance, you will see that the entire fleet is like a chain of iron chains, connected into a whole by the power of law. The action of forces is mutual. The thing they brought with them, when struggling with Anchor Bay, failed to catch fish but was caught instead. Instead of pulling the people of the bay into a dream and letting them be flattened or rounded at will, the fleet was dragged over forcibly. As time went by, they even came within the range of the coastal fortress artillery. Violet's sapphire eyes instantly ignited with raging fire, and she raised her right hand with the whalebone signet ring high. The clear and bloody command echoed throughout the port. As acting commander, I hereby order that Anchor Bay enter a wartime state and implement temporary control. No one is allowed to go out, and irrelevant pirates are not allowed to disembark or leave the anchorage. The combatants at Anchor Bay entered their respective combat posts and opened Level 3 permissions to the artillery groups at each fortress, allowing them to see through the fog and observe the enemy situation. The guests are here, treat them well. Roar. Now that the maze connected to the pirate code has not been stolen by the insider, they are not afraid of any frontal attack from the navy. Soon, hundreds of fortress guns deployed outside the port adjusted their firing angles and aimed at the Strait Fleet outside the port. Open fire! Beat them up! Violet, finally feeling proud, waved her hands suddenly. Boom boom boom! Countless lines of fire were like angry dragons, interweaving into a tight fire net, completely enveloping the Strait Fleet that was huddled together without even having time to spread out its battle line. The advantages of coastal fortress guns are much greater than those of naval guns and battleships. Even the smallest land area has much more maneuvering space than a warship, so you can use scorching bombs without worrying about accidentally causing a secondary explosion. The target size of the coastal defense artillery is only 1/1000th of the battleship, so even if the gunner expert wants to hit it, it will be extremely difficult. The stable land is free from the turbulence of the sea, which greatly improves the accuracy of the fortress cannon. The most important thing is that the main gun of the second-class battleship is only 32 pounds, but the largest fortress gun in Anchor Bay reaches an astonishing 68 pounds. This thing can really kill you. Chapter 89. Offshore Balancer, Eat My Shit Stick. Rumble. The hull of the King Edward, which was given special attention, was hit by a bullet. The 68-pound, or 30-kilogram, cast iron shell caused the hull of a second-class ship to shake slightly. A wailing sounded in the cabin. But their first thought was not to fight back, but to immediately check for leaks. Because the things in the cabin are far more dangerous than the fortress cannon, little Norwich in the lower cabin cried out in surprise. What's going on? Is the disaster out of control? It could easily destroy the Lancaster family, so why would it fail in front of the mere people of the bay? The lawyers in charge of guarding the thing were even more confused than he was. They gripped the batons in their hands tightly and watched nervously the every move of the corrupt tentacle in the painted pottery jar. I couldn't help but think back to the confidential information I had seen when I took on this mission. It was said to be brought back from overseas by a great adventurer. Remember that the common laws, interests, and emotions of mankind mean nothing in the infinite vastness of the world. When we cross the boundaries of reason and the spiritual dam and enter the boundless unknown world, we must leave our humanity and all common sense behind. Compared to those ancient beings that spanned the entire length of human history, we are humble, small, and ignorant. Just look at that broken tentacle and you will know that there are some things in this world that are beyond the cognition of humans, even the top extraordinary beings. His status is at least above the fifth-order legendary king, the pinnacle of the secular kingdom. Unable to communicate, unable to look each other in the eye, and even using humans' poor language, it is impossible to properly describe the image of the other person. To human beings, they are natural phenomena of the extraordinary world, but also disasters themselves. And the thing in the box is one of them, or part of something indescribable. The only lucky thing is that, apart from their love of eating humans, they have no subjective consciousness of their own, but there are indeed certain objective laws in their bodies. It is just like early humans tamed wildfires, mastered fire, and thus entered civilization. By finding the rules and utilizing them, it is possible to control this natural disaster and use it for my own benefit. At least the York family believed that they had tamed this power, and even often regarded themselves as the fire thieves of the new era. But in all the emergency plans, there is no strategy for how the other party should respond after failing to prey, and the longer the seal is released, the more active the tentacle becomes. A sharp-eyed lawyer noticed that its body seemed to have begun to twitch slightly. The Grand Justice realized that this couldn't go on any longer, and he had to find a way to guide the natural disaster to abandon the marked target and allow the two sides to disengage again. Otherwise, the fleet would have no chance of winning if it fought head-on against the unsinkable Anchor Bay and fortress guns. Holding the second-level holy relic, Pied Piper's shepherd's flute, which was specially used to counteract the natural disaster, he began to chant, "You are the hero who eliminated the Black Rat Plague, and you are the evil star who killed all the children in the city. Each relic carries a unique piece of human history and has had a huge influence in a certain region or field. To activate such a treasure, one does not use a simple cutting inscription like a man-made wonder, but rather chants its deeds to allow history to reappear. The history he was singing was about the city of Hamelin in the Rhine Confederation 200 years ago. The city was seriously infested with rats, and the residents were helpless and prepared to abandon the city and flee. A piper in a flowery dress claimed that he could solve the rat problem, but he needed a reward, and the citizens agreed to his request. But when he blew his flute and drove all the rats to jump into the river and die, the citizens regretted their debt. When the fooled Pied Piper played his flute again, all the children in the city followed him involuntarily and disappeared forever into the mountains. Effect: can play hypnotic magic sounds to all mentally challenged people. The scourge cannot be forcibly controlled like the rat swarm, but it is enough to exert influence on it. The nauseating flute sound rang out again, and it did have an effect on the tentacles that were competing with the entire Anchor Bay. Although they failed to really make it loose, the fleet's speed finally slowed down. This gave the Navy time to regroup and launch a counterattack at Anchor Bay with its naval guns. All ships should form a battle line. Reload starboard windward and return fire. Keep going, victory will be ours, God bless your majesty. It was unknown what magical item was used, but the voice of Fleet Commander Norwich York overwhelmed the roar of the fortress's cannons and was clearly heard by every soldier. God bless your majesty. The Red and White Roses had fought a civil war for 30 years. They were all veterans who had experienced many battles, and when they worked together, they were much stronger than the Bay People's pirates. Dozens of warships lined up in a row and launched a fleet salvo, which was equally terrifying. But the maze is more than just fog, it is also a perception shield at an extraordinary level. Without the corresponding authority, a third-level navigator cannot see through the defenses in the port. In addition, the naval guns had a very poor hit rate at a distance of more than 200 meters, and their destructive power against the fortress guns in the harbor was very limited. Even if they were allowed to continue bombarding like this for 10 days or half a month, Anchor Bay would still be able to withstand it. For a moment, the battle seemed to be at a stalemate. If the Pied Piper's shepherd's flute can successfully calm the completely mindless tentacles in a short period of time and return them to the seal. The York family's loss was only the Redbeard gang, which was not a serious loss. But Byron, who had a blood feud with White Rose, didn't want to send this Channel fleet back intact. Seeing that the other party was not pulled into the maze in one breath and was stranded in the complex criss-crossing waterways, Byron secretly said it was a pity. Even if these traitors took over my fleet. This batch of warships, especially the third-level battleships, is at least equivalent to one-third of their assets. If this fleet could be destroyed, it would definitely cause great trouble to the newly crowned Edward IV. Amid internal and external troubles, many vassals who originally belonged to Lancaster would be in a much better situation in the kingdom. In the future, my chances of playing both sides will be much greater. Besides, if the old people of the York family don't die and vacate their positions, how can I, the new confidant of the York family, smoothly take the position in the future? Once this bold idea came into being, it took root deeply in Byron's mind and could never be shaken off. A series of plans took shape rapidly. Pulling Violet aside, the two of them whispered a few words. Then he took out the echo conch and transformed himself into Redbeard's confidant executioner Bill. Thinking back to the information he had obtained from the echo record and the specific information about the person he had called in his memory, he silently organized his words and then spoke in a panic. "Hello, Colonel Norwich, are you there?" The two held their breath and waited for a while, and then a voice that was obviously very unexpected came from inside. "Are you Bill, Redbeard's henchman? I seem to have heard your voice several times when I was communicating with him before. Redbeard is a very nice guy. He has already given the Navy Department a detailed list of pirates." Even young Norwich knew that Bill was his most trusted confidant. After confirming Bill's identity, he quickly asked, "Where's Redbeard? Have you got the position of Overlord?" The actor Byron was possessed, and his voice was choked with sobs. "It's too bad, Captain Norwich, our nemesis is in such a bad state. We were accidentally tricked by those treacherous Bay people into entering Valhalla, and then were besieged. My brothers suffered heavy losses. Even the first mate and the captain's guards were all killed in the battle. However, we finally won just now. After coming out of Valhalla, I saw the fortress guns in the port firing outwards, and I knew that you must be in trouble." Without a word, the captain led his crew to stop the big pirates and blew up some of the fortress cannons. At the same time, shouts of killing were heard from the side under Violet's command. Many of the fortress guns in the port suddenly misfired, just like the real thing. Among them was a second-level singer in the Hall of Fame sequence, who imitated Redbeard's shouts perfectly. The captain asked me to inform you that he will open the maze lock soon. Please command the fleet and come to support as soon as possible. Those Taiwanese are going crazy and are fighting desperately. Please support them as soon as possible. He gave Violet a wink, and the latter immediately activated her authority, causing the milky white mist that formed the maze on the outside to slowly dissipate. It's just that the fog is too thick, and it may take some time for it to completely dissipate. This strategy is not complicated. It just requires finding a way to lure the other party in. As soon as they enter the range of the maze, they can close the door again and start an all-round one-way beating mode. Chapter 23. When the time comes, when the fortress's guns are fully opened, this straight fleet will definitely be destroyed to pieces. Or you could just trap them to death in a month or two and get a fleet for free. Okay, hold on, I'll report to the commander to support you. The other party hung up the call. But they waited for a long time, but the fleet did not change its formation, and even the signal lights did not flash. Only a lowest level, level 6 cruiser left the main force and cautiously drove over. Byron shook his head at Violet, who was also disappointed. No, this guy didn't fall for it. He was a little too cautious. There were not many direct descendants of the Lancaster and York families, only about a dozen each at most, so Byron was naturally well aware of their intelligence. Even if you don't listen to the echo recorded in the conch, you can tell which one is coming by looking at the opponent's flagship. Little Norwich is a greedy and mercenary man. Under normal circumstances, if there is an opportunity to turn defeat into victory and recover losses, he will definitely not let it go. Even instigating Old Norwich would be a natural thing to do. But seeing how cautious they are now, I'm afraid that even if they miss the opportunity, they won't take the risk personally before the situation becomes clear. If you think about it in a darker way, it would be in their best interest to let the Redbeard forces fight the Taiwanese people to the death and consume the Taiwanese people's strength to the maximum extent. Byron didn't know that Little Norwich had just received instruction from his father. York can pay the cost of countless trial and error, but that cost must not be themselves. And there is one most important taboo: absolutely, absolutely do not let that thing soak in sea water. Until the anchor bay was completely disarmed, the King Edward would never take a single step forward and risk being hit from the leeward position and having its bottom cabin penetrated. However, York's defences may have been watertight, but Byron was still harbouring a lot of evil intentions. If one plan fails, immediately come up with another one. He took out his octopus silver coin and summoned another man-eating shark. Because the 30 silver coins have never been unified, the black mass ceremony of collecting group elements continues. It must be unpleasant to have meat but not be able to eat it and just sit there anxiously. But if you feed the meal directly to that thing's mouth, who will it choose to eat first? Since they didn't come over, Byron would sneak over there. In short, you must eat this stick for me today. Chapter 90, The Kraken's Touch. The fleet's flagship, King Edward. By sheer coincidence, a 68-pound solid bullet penetrated the lower side of the ship, almost hitting the waterline. It would be fine if the warship maintained its current windward position, but once it resumed normal sailing, seawater would surely pour back into the cabin. In order to prevent water from entering, all the gun ports on the lower gun deck were sealed. This floor could not be used for combat and naturally there were no combatants. Only the ubiquitous legal network monitors the entire ship. The captain, first mate, second mate, and navigator serve as network nodes and are responsible for dispatching personnel at any time. The lower deck has been pierced near the midships. Carpenters, go and plug the hole. Upon hearing the order, a carpenter who had been on standby nearby immediately rushed over with tools. Yes, sir. Leave it to me. A series of knowledge such as hull structure, material, ingredients, best repair plan, etc. flowed through his mind. This crew member named Tom Rex is not only a carpenter, but also a first-level attendant-level craftsman of the tower sequence. His gift of extensive knowledge and strong memory allowed him to master every skill within his field to perfection, and he alone was as capable as an entire damage control team. The highest level of craftsman that can be found on a warship is usually no higher than the second level. Because as long as they reach the second level, they will be able to master the core ability spiritual casting. If they are given enough extraordinary materials, they can stably produce the lowest level of strange objects. There was an extreme shortage of even survival supplies on the ship, so where could they get any materials to practice the motto of dispelling ignorance with knowledge? It's such a waste of life. Unless it is an exploration ship heading for overseas routes, which has the opportunity to come into contact with all kinds of new knowledge and new materials, it will attract craftsmen and other extraordinary people in the tower sequence. Therefore, although Tom Rex was only a first-rank officer, he was treated well and had a good status on the ship. Not only do they have the right to come to the lower deck, but as long as they serve for 2 years, they can enter the university in the royal capital without taking an exam. Then become a scholar in a certain field, embark on an extraordinary path in the fast lane of life. Unfortunately, today is not his lucky day. He had just rushed to the hole through the devastated lower deck, guided by the flickering artillery fire from outside, and hung the whale oil lamp on the wall. Through the wheel-sized hole, I saw a huge black shadow under the dark water, which seemed to be swinging its tail violently. A figure jumped out of the water with the power of its tail and slid into the hole like a fish. Ah, yes! Before the craftsman could shout out, Byron had already grabbed him by the throat and with a twist of his hands he easily broke his neck. A first-level craftsman doesn't even have any combat skills. If he encounters a surprise attack, he will be no better than a battle-hardened mortal soldier. At this time, the whalebone amulet underwater breathing hanging on Byron's body dimmed again. It was with the help of the equipment Violet gave him and a man-eating shark that he was able to sneak out of Anchor Bay. Side effects: the maximum usage time is half an hour. If the time limit is exceeded, fish gills, fish bladders, fish scales, or other messy aquatic organs will grow. The probe waved outside the hole, signaling that it was safe to sneak in. A few dozen meters away in the waves, Violet, who had also used underwater breathing to lurk here, continued to stay where she was with the shark. The mission of this third-level extraordinary being is to support the retreat and provide support for Byron's actions. As craftsman Tom Rex fell to the ground and died. Suddenly, 2 barking sounds of hounds were heard from Byron's shadow. An illusory human figure immediately emerged from the dead man's body and was pulled into the shadow. Wild Hunt Legion is launched. Tom Rex also became his first undead servant. A cool breath flowed through Byron's brain, seeming to make his thinking faster. It's not bad. After killing the enemy, you can choose whether to recruit his soul. This way, your team won't be full of bad guys. Moreover, this amplifying ability seems to be related to the enemy's occupation in his previous life. Scholar-type professions focus on the spiritual aspect, while combat-type professions will probably focus on the physical aspect. This craftsman probably increased my basic quality by about 10%. Unfortunately, these undead servants do not have the sanity they had in their lifetime, nor do they retain any professional abilities, so their value is greatly reduced. Byron also knew that he was daydreaming. If they could retain their extraordinary abilities from their lifetime, then the Wild Hunt would be invincible in the legal system. Combining all sequences into one is probably a height that only God can achieve, right? Then again, since this ability can continue to improve as it becomes more legendary, we can imagine what it will look like in the future. A red light flashed in the palm of his hand, and the Blood Holy Grail was activated to destroy the corpse. After harvesting an undead servant, he also harvested a portion of transmutation blood. At the same time, the octopus silver coin on his body also absorbs the most distinctive label of the craftsman, a crew member of the King Edward and a naval soldier of the Channel Fleet. Byron looked at the clean ground except for a few relics and nodded with satisfaction. My frugality can only be compared with 10 ways of eating one fish. Sashimi, steamed fish belly, chopped pepper fish head, fried fish intestines and eggs, fish bone soup, and even the fried fish scales are not wasted. Just use some wooden boards to nail up the holes on the side of the boat so that no one can find them for a while, thus fooling people. He turned around and used cognitive modification to transform into the appearance of craftsman Tom. The real undead servant Tom rushed into Byron's body and completed the partial possession. Just like the ghost behind him, the spirits all have the inherent skill of possession. The undead servants that make up the Wild Hunt can forcibly possess the bodies of other mortals, or they can possess Byron's body. Even though he has lost his extraordinary abilities and his memory is somewhat flawed, his most core instincts are still there. With the help of psychological disguise, Byron can still thrive even if he blends into a group of people with complicated interpersonal relationships. Since the stronger one is in life, the greater the bonus after death. After the one-time sacrifice, the Wild Hunt Knight I will transform into will be even stronger. It's better not to waste the remaining 19 spots on ordinary people. Having made up his mind, he immediately strode to the end of the lower gun deck, where there was a wooden ladder leading to the bottom cabin and a carpentry passage reserved for carpenters. 30 silver coins. Effect 3. 30 silver coins is the price for selling the Holy Son. The only God, the bound Creator, bears the sins of all mankind through his own suffering. If the freaks can collect all 30 silver coins in a set, they can completely complete the Black Mass ritual and gain redemption. But it will eventually awaken the true master of the ritual. Byron and Violet had already used those silver coins to locate where the real thing was hidden. From Tom's memory, he saw that there was only a group of lawyers guarding the bottom cabin, and other people on the ship were strictly prohibited from entering or leaving. Is there any need to think about this? Of course, he went straight to Huang Long without hesitation. The footsteps faded away in the darkness. The iron law of kingship, Magna Carta that filled the entire battleship cabin and even the entire fleet, did not respond at all from beginning to end. Those illusory golden lions wearing crowns and holding pure golden scales in their arms also all became blind. Even after witnessing the murder of his own crew members, he remained indifferent and had no intention of warning the officers on his ship. When the blue-green tattoo on Byron's index finger lit up slightly, they all lowered their heads and made way for the road ahead that should have been closed. Obviously, if it weren't for the storm signet ring in his hand, it would be impossible for him to kill people silently on the ship, let alone sneak onto the ship. No wonder the York family is determined to kill them all. He is to the House of York now as the House of York was to Lancaster. A person who is eyeing his royal power covetously and may even replace him must not be allowed to stay. Stop, Mr. Tom, you do not have access to the lower deck. There is no water in the bottom cabin, and you cannot temporarily use the woodworking passage. Please return to your post and wait for orders. Just as Byron was about to reach the entrance, a team of 4 Marines led by a captain and armed with sailor knives stopped him. The mechanical network of laws will ignore his existence, but these living people will not. But their response: wash boom. Boom. Byron glanced at the lit-up whalebone amulet. Silence. He spun the 2 shotguns, organ black and white keys in his hands, stepped over 4 bodies riddled with holes and continued forward. Ordinary muskets would get waterlogged, so Violet specially lent him these 2 beloved rare muskets temporarily. One shot can kill a large area of people, and there is no place to hide in the narrow aisle of the cabin. It is more convenient to use than a flintlock rifle. It is still the all-round utilization of transmutation blood, Wild Hunt Legion, and octopus silver coins. The ghost of the captain joined the team and was a first-level fortress guardian of the fortress sequence. Byron's physical strength increased significantly. However, the French network failed, the sound of gunfire was muffled by the silencing amulet, and the others who were in the state of artillery battle did not notice that there was an invader in the heart of the battleship. Byron strode into the carpentry passage, and following the familiar chaotic flute sound, he found the cabin where a group of law mages were guarding the scourge. The hatch was suddenly pushed open, and the group of lawyers inside turned their heads and looked coldly at Byron, who walked in with a gun. Tom? How did you get here? Get out! The memory of a superhuman is far superior to that of an ordinary person. As a colonel on the ship, young Norwich knew everyone and immediately scolded them. If an ordinary sailor trespasses into the restricted area, it would not be excessive to shoot him on the spot. Even extraordinary people must accept severe punishment. Byron didn't even bother to look at this group of lawyers. His attention was immediately drawn to the painted pottery jar that they were gathered in the middle of. Inexplicable whispers flowed through his ears. That strange feeling was sticky and slippery, like rustling tentacles flowing over the eardrums, and then melting into the stinking mud in the swamp and pouring into the skull. And in those extremely messy, completely illogical and unsystematic crazy ramblings, he vaguely heard a name that was so old that it already smelled of decay. Touch of the Kraken. Suddenly, Byron realized that this was just a fantasy that best matched his own cognition, and it did not mean that the indescribable existence was really called this name. Just such a name alone, if ordinary people or some extraordinary beings listen carefully, their SAN value may drop drastically and they may become insane. Chapter 51. But Byron seemed to hear steamed squid, steamed octopus, grilled squid, grilled octopus, braised squid, grilled squid. The list of dishes read out in a row makes your mouth water. I can't finish it at all, as he finally completed the last piece of information. Secret, the conspiracy of the Admiralty, historical influence 20. The decryption density was instantly increased from 75% to 100%. The unlocking density of secret, shadow of the Red and White Rose War, historical influence 31 has also increased from 40% to 50%. Captain, you have received a spiritual gift and a new entry. Chapter 91. An outlaw. Touch of the Kraken. Byron came back to his senses and swallowed subconsciously, still chewing on the name with lingering interest. To put it simply, the thing in the jar in front of you is a broken tentacle of the indescribable creature Kraken. As a former chef with a tentacle fetish, no one knows tentacles better than Byron. The octopus is a creature said to have 3 hearts and 9 brains. We will not mention its 3 hearts, but its 9 brains are located in its head and 8 tentacles. There are about 5 million neurons in total, 40% of which are in the main brain, and the rest are scattered in various sub-brains. The secondary brains in the octopus's tentacles are independent of each other and do not interfere with each other. Even the tentacles of an ordinary octopus can remain active for a period of time after being broken, and can even sense the external environment. For an indescribable thing, this incomplete tentacle can be regarded as the other party's smaller clone. Even though there was still a thick fog, Byron finally locked onto the true identity of the accomplice in the genocide. Boom! The lawyer closest to Byron paused with his staff and shouted angrily. "Didn't you hear me? Get out of here and go to the ship's executioner to receive your punishment after the battle." As he spoke, a heavy pressure like a mountain roared towards him. If you ask the extraordinary people which hostile profession they least want to encounter, the answers may be different. But among the top 3, there must be a place for lawyer. Their strongest point is that they can borrow the power of another to bully others. Every member of the kingdom who is subject to the iron law of royal power is part of the legal system. The stricter their discipline, the stronger the law that reigns here. Especially in places like naval warships, which belong to the country's own territory and where military discipline can only be described as strict. The power of iron law of royal power is naturally incredibly strong. At this time, as long as there is another lawyer who can rely on the law network to cast laws that far exceed his own abilities, it will be enough to easily crush those of the same level. It can be said that the safest place in the entire fleet is not the fleet commander's command room, but this small cabin. Boom! But the only response he got was a gunshot. Looking at his companion who had countless heart holes on his chest and was lying in a pool of blood with his eyes wide open. Each of these lawyers, who came from a noble family and held a very respected position, opened their mouths in disbelief. For a moment, I was unable to recover from the violent and bloody scene of no matter how high the position is, he can be shot down with one shot. What? How dare you, lowly soldier, kill a noble lord of the Partridge family? It was the battle-hardened third-rank Judge Dude Wright who reacted the fastest. He put down the shepherd's flute in his hand and shouted, "Law, the use of any hot weapons is prohibited here." Core ability at the second stage law: interpret the laws in one's own iron law of royal power in person and make judgments on certain behaviors, which will take effect as long as they are within one's jurisdiction. This ability was further enhanced in the hands of the third-level Grand Justice. To a certain extent, they are given discretion and no longer need to read out the laws. As long as they think it is reasonable, they can implement the laws according to their own ideas. Just one skill can spawn a series of powerful methods without any shortcomings. Another lawyer swung his staff and smashed it hard on Byron's head. Go to hell. Humans are social animals that are very susceptible to blind obedience. When the leader remains calm and his side has more people, it will trigger the positive gain of using the majority to bully the minority. At this time, no matter what kind of ferocious beast or powerful enemy they face, human confidence will approach infinity. This is what Byron and other Bay residents did when facing the natural disaster just now, and this is what they are doing now when facing Byron. The wild hunt needs to bring fear to the dead in order to achieve the best effect. You guys still have the guts to resist, it really makes it difficult for me to deal with you. Byron shook his head regretfully. Boom, he raised his hand and gave him a big brain hole. The decree issued by a third-rank judge had no effect on him. And this time is different. It's not just the effect from the storm ring, but also the third entry outlaw that he obtained after historical revisor and heart-wrenching trouble. False outlaws, lawless and reckless. The real outlaw, outside the law and not subject to criminal law. When the French Open comes, you will always be in the net. From now on, not only can the Magna Carta of Hattings not judge you, only the king can. The laws of various countries that originated from the Holy Silver Empire and belong to the same continental legal system will greatly weaken the restrictive effect on you and no longer have a crushing advantage. In addition, criminal groups are the ultimate form of lawless lunatics. As a guiding light for the outlaws, you understand the law and can use the Pirate 10 Commandments to protect your crew. Your team will no longer be your weak spot when facing the Hastings Lomage. Although the ability is somewhat overlapping with that of the Seal Ring, it is equivalent to allowing his future team to launch a special attack on the Kingdom of Hastings ruled by the York family. Yes, I like this name very much. He looked up and gave an evil smile to the stunned lawyers. The outlaw. The remaining lawyers were in a panic and had no idea what was going on. In line with the principle of making big bricks fly, he began to recite loudly the provisions of the Magna Carta. King John of Hastings, ordained by heaven. Greetings to the archbishops, bishops, abbots, earls, barons, judges, foresters, sheriffs, wardens, messengers, their stewards, and the obedient people. The French network of the entire fleet responded with a bang, and the blessing was added here. The silver light was almost visible to the naked eye. However, he brought out Byron's 8th-generation ancestor 200 years ago, King John the Lost, who signed the Magna Carta, to suppress him, the legitimate heir to the throne. Law: anyone who uses firearms here will suffer the consequences. But the Chief Justice's second order was still torn to pieces by a steel ball. The shotgun blasts hit everyone, opening up countless brain holes and minds in this group of law mages. Impossible. Why? Why is this happening? They are all going crazy. I almost thought I was hallucinating because of the tentacle. The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear, and the oldest and strongest fear comes from the unknown. Byron, who is inexplicably immune to all attacks from the laws, is as terrifying as the indescribable thing in the jar. When he remembered that he had various defensive strange items in his pocket that he never used, he hurriedly prepared to activate them. But it had already been completely swallowed up by the steel ball storm. Trapped in this unknown fear, the power they retained after becoming a member of the Wild Hunt was naturally exceptionally strong. Among them, the death of the third-level Chief Justice was the most unjust. In the outside world, he was almost invincible among people of the same level wherever he went, but he didn't expect that today he would be defeated by a small first-level attendant. Even if the magical belt on his body could automatically protect him from crossbow arrows and stray bullets, it would only be a waste of Byron's sonata of sorrow. There are gains and losses. The power of a lawyer comes from the most stringent laws. Naturally, he has no power to resist the source of his power. I still need to shoot to kill them here. If the current King Edward IV were here, their performance would be even worse. In just a few breaths, the bottom cabin was completely flooded with blood. Behind Byron, led by Chief Justice Dude Wright, whose spirit looked like a living person, stood 20 undead servants of different heights, weights, and bodies. The Legion was full of vacancies and had to give up several of the average-level mages. The octopus silver coin in Byron's hand was soaked in blood, and the octopus on it seemed to be alive. Moreover, if the transmutation blood brewed by a third-level extraordinary is combined with Angel's Kiss for the crew, it should be enough to train 4 or 5 first-level servants at once. Byron turned his head and found that the only person left in the cabin was little Norwich, who had shrunk into the corner at the beginning. The captain's voice was trembling. I am a direct descendant of the York family, and my father is the fleet commander. Don't kill me. Who sent you here? Those one people? Whatever you want, wealth, power, resources, knowledge, the York family can give it to you. But Byron slowly pointed the gun at his forehead and said jokingly, "Stop pretending. The standard amulet for royal descendants has been crushed, right? Your father, old Norwich, will probably be arriving soon. Guess why I left you for last?" I heard footsteps rushing like the wind overhead, and an anxious shout, "Stop it, villain!" The cowardice and fear on little Norwich's face disappeared instantly. He rushed towards Byron viciously, cursing, "You devil, I'm waiting for you in hell." In the war-torn age of exploration, the top families could not produce absolute waste. At the critical moment of life and death, he was just acting to gain a chance to escape. Boom, the shot came at close range, and the hot steel balls tore his entire head into pieces. Giving hope, but then giving despair, Byron at this time was not only an outlaw, but also the infamous son of the devil on the York family's wanted list. "I want to return every bit of what you gave me." Chapter 92, The Wild Hunt Knight is summoned. At the moment when little Norwich continued to fall forward by inertia, Byron did not activate the blood grail to turn him into transmutation blood. With just a wave of his hand, the large amount of blood in his neck was automatically collected into the warrior's cup. He also placed 2 small fiery red spherical objects under his body. Then he pulled away and flew away. Next moment. Boom! Fleet Commander Old Norwich, who rushed over from the command room in the stern deck as soon as he received the distress signal, did not take the complicated passages inside the ship. Instead, he crushed the lower deck with one foot and fell directly from the sky. It happened to fall next to Little Norwich, where Byron had just stood. Little Norwich's final shout was not only to vent his meaningless anger, but also to give his father guidance. But it was just a second too late, and the fleet commander, old Norwich York, only saw his son's body lying on the ground. Even because he had just had his head blown off. The nervous system, muscle tissue, etc. that are still alive in the body are still twitching instinctively, trying to save this gradually cooling body. It just pumped more blood out of the carotid artery in vain, which looked extremely tragic. What? Looking at the corpse at his feet, old Norwich's eyes turned red, his whole body trembled and he howled like a lone wolf. This is his only son. Under the intense emotional excitement, he didn't even bother to punish Byron, the culprit, and he stumbled forward to help his only son up from the ground. But the corpse had just left the ground 3 centimeters when old Norwich's spirituality seemed to suddenly sense something. His face changed drastically, and he let go and retreated violently. The 2 booby traps under the corpse exploded immediately. Obviously, Byron left young Norwich to be killed last, not to play a trick on him, but simply to use him to trick the old man again. The bottom hold was the thickest part of the entire battleship's hull, and was covered with a full layer of pig iron ballast. The violent explosion did not damage the bottom of the ship. But it swept in all directions, carrying with it the broken shrapnel and the fragments of Little Norwich's body. Although the Knight Commander had a keen sense of perception and retreated quickly, he was still the first to be hit and was instantly swallowed up by the blood mist. Seeing this human tragedy, Byron, who had already retreated to the corner and hidden behind a thick ship rib, could no longer hold back and revealed a wanton smile. "Haha, wonderful!" Byron hadn't been this happy in over a month, ever since he woke up on the man-eating shark. The more pain York was in, the happier he was. It doesn't matter how many privateer pirates die in Anchor Bay. Even if the Norwich father and son named York were not counted, under the protection of the Hastings law, he brazenly killed all the dozen or so lawyers in the cabin. A loss of this magnitude was no less than the destruction of the fleet, and was enough to make Edward IV vomit 3 liters of blood. But, it's not enough, this is far from enough. Charging a little interest in advance from the York family and their vassals was just a pleasant surprise. Byron did not forget the real purpose of boarding the ship. He turned his head and looked at the tentacle that made him full of appetite. The previous massacre intentionally avoided the compass-shaped magic circle at the other end of the cabin, and the painted pottery jar containing the piece of touch of the Kraken was also unharmed. This is actually an existence that is above the king. Byron has found the information brought back from overseas in the broken memories of the undead servants he had just recruited. I have a vague idea of the existence of this thing. I know that outside the humanized world ruled by the Silver Law, there are many things that are beyond the cognition of humans and even the peak extraordinary people. The origin of the Kraken's touch seems to be a god worshipped on a certain indigenous island. Anyone who wants to destroy such a being, whether by blowing it up with explosives or ramming it with a ship, must be thinking that his own life is too long. There is one more taboo worth taking advantage of. Absolutely cannot let that thing soak in sea water. But the consequences of violating this taboo will cause it to completely get out of control, which may turn out to be good or bad. Now it is still entangled in Anchor Bay. If we let it go free and there is no way to check and balance it, it will be of no benefit to either the enemy or us. The best case scenario is that it can let go of the Anchor Bay and turn around to hold on to the Strait Fleet. This was also their original plan. Byron squeezed the 30 octopus silver coins that were stored separately in his pocket. The rest depends on it. As long as all the silver coins are soaked with the blood of the same person anywhere on this battleship, the blasphemous Black Mass ceremony can be ended and the power of the touch of the Kraken can be summoned, prompting the Kraken's reach to loosen its hold on Iron Anchor Bay and shift its attack target to the closer Strait Fleet. Although this group of law mages is small in number, their ranks are high enough that they can be used to mark fleets, or even extended to their respective noble families without much problem. It would be best if the blood of the Norwich father and son could be used to end the ceremony, and York could be dragged into the water at the same time. But I need to stay away when they do it, so that I won't be hurt when they are eaten. However, when the blood mist dissipated and the only motionless figure on the ground was revealed again, Byron did not step forward to bleed old Norwich. Instead, he took a step back and suddenly fired a shot overhead, blasting a large hole in the deck above his head. He used mountain goat steps and jumped out of the cabin without hesitation. As soon as he jumped out, he heard a roar from behind. "Ah! Bastard, come back here, I'm going to tear you to pieces." A figure covered in wounds also flew out of the hole and shot towards Byron like a cannonball. It was the old Norwich who had just been hit by a booby trap. Apparently he had used some unconventional means to avoid being killed by the bomb, and he took the opportunity to lie on the ground and prepare to ambush this unpredictable and extremely cunning enemy. But they didn't know that even if the ship log in Byron's hand could not read his detailed history, it could still determine his life or death by whether history had ended. Old Norwich was obviously not feeling well, if not dead. His head and face were covered in blood, one of his eyes was blind, and one of his arms was broken and hung limply at the side of his body. Moreover, he was wearing a red armor that looked like an insect shell but had a metallic luster and was rapidly spreading from his chest and back to his entire body. It only took a breath or two, and not only was the arm connected using an external skeleton, but a full covering set of knight armor was also formed. Even in his hand, a blade like a knight's heavy sword grew out. An extremely fierce aura spread out. It makes people wonder if they are facing not a human being, but a worm-shaped monster. Byron used the silver barrel of Byron's gun as a convex mirror and saw the appearance of Old Norwich behind him. His eyes narrowed slightly. This is not the ability of a normal magical object. It is more like a creation of some kind of black magic. I knew that the York family must have come into contact with some kind of forbidden knowledge recently, and the root cause of the final outcome of the 30 Years' War for the throne was also found. The logbook could not see the changes in him, but the answer was found in the newly recruited little Norwich. Forbidden knowledge, Book of Giant Insects: using various insects as raw materials, we transform their bloodlines through forbidden knowledge and rituals, and use them as combat assistants for extraordinary people. The one cultivated in Norwich is called dragon bone worm, also known as iron bone dragon nematode. It can coexist with the human body, providing the owner with a layer of defense that is no less than that of the Iron Knight's armor, as well as super regenerative capabilities. The side effect is photophobia. The parasite armor must not be used in the sun. And if used too many times, it may completely turn into a big bug. The York family has abundant resources at their disposal, and as long as they master the knowledge, they can achieve great things in a short period of time. Especially worth mentioning. The source of this forbidden knowledge is actually the same as the Bloody Mary's gourmet recipe in Byron's hand, both of which come from the bloodthirsty cult, Chapter 28. Even the York family's acquisition of the Kraken's touch seemed to be inseparable from the help of this mysterious cult. This piece of information really surprised Byron. The bloodthirsty cult actually has such a relationship with the York family. The two sides have always cooperated in overseas colonies. With this clue, there is no need to search around in the vast ocean. I am one step closer to obtaining the ritual Scarlet Holy Grail, removing the side effects of the blood brew, and obtaining the blood of immortality. Facing a monster that also practiced black magic, he was not worried about his own safety. Before he was about to end the Black Mass, he had already found a way out, and murdering Old Norwich was just a piece of cake. It would be best if we can kill him. If we can't, it would be fine to just use the blood of little Norwich. The only difference is that it hurts York, or even more. At this moment, including a third-level Chief Justice, a total of 20 professional undead servants brought him huge ability bonus. Byron felt that even under normal circumstances, it would be easy to defeat a second-level transcendent. And this is not his limit. He quickly rushed to the big hole where he came from and turned around to look at the big bug. After confirming that the logbook had recorded all the information in the minds of the group of undead servants behind him, he decisively activated the second level of the Wild Hunt Legion. Let out a low drink, Wild Hunt Knight, summon us. Suddenly, a loud and dark barking of a hound was heard in the dark cabin. Pale blue flames burst out from Byron's body, and the 20 undead servants behind him appeared one by one and rushed into the pale blue flames like moths to a flame. Boom! The huge flame column exploded, causing Old Norwich, who was overwhelmed by anger and hatred, to stop in his tracks, his face filled with surprise and doubt. What? Next moment. Day! A pitch-black horse hoof as big as a bowl stepped out into flames. Next came the horse legs covered in bone armor, and the horse head with sharp teeth, thorny horns, and pale blue eyes. The terrifying atmosphere, like a sea of blood and corpses, that makes one's back chill, is overwhelming. A tall knight on horseback, wearing a black full-body armor and a blood-red cloak, suddenly swung the thick and long lance in his hand. A blue flame erupted, easily blasting a large hole in the bulwark on one side of the battleship. As soon as he pulled the reins, it was as if the man and the horse became one. He leaped up and rushed straight up the ship's side, which was almost a 90-degree slope. In the darkness, Burning footprints like branding irons were left behind. This is Wild Hunt. Even though Old Norwich had never seen such a thing before, he instinctively blurted out the word as his heart was greatly shocked. In order to plan the Anchor Bay for the Bidi Bay people, he had read too much relevant information. The Wild Hunt is too famous in the mythological system of the god of prophecy, royal power, and the Wild Hunt. At this moment, Norwich almost thought that this was the spirit of the legendary primitive god, who was coming to punish these Bay people traitors and invaders with his own hands. After all, they were the ancestors not only of the Lancasters and Baymen, but also of the House of York. But the hatred in his heart immediately overwhelmed his fear of the unknown, and he rushed out of the big hole and chased after him. Even if you burst out with all your strength, your aura can only reach the 3rd level at most. You will definitely die today. Even the Wild Hunt King Woden himself can't save you. Chapter 93, Relic, the Iron Nail that Destroyed a Nation. On the sea outside, heavy cold rain was pouring down. Woo woo woo. The ghost horse carried Byron at lightning speed along the outer wall of the ship. Even through a layer of black bone armor, he could clearly feel the whistling wind brushing against his cheeks. The storm that had been brewing in the sky for a long time was like a huge demon, wantonly venting its power on the sea. Although apart from the pale blue flame that he could casually swing, he did not gain any additional supernatural powers. Byron's own abilities have been comprehensively enhanced, including strength, speed, perception, and spirituality. It made him feel as if he was omnipotent at the moment. Of course he was very clear-headed. This was just an illusion caused by the sudden increase of power in a short period of time. In an instant, he burned up a 3rd-level transcendent. The power that erupted from the 19-second level transcendence really allowed him to experience the power of the 3rd level in advance. The Storm Knight's ride allowed him to control the ghost horse like a fish in water, with even more power than a tiger, and there was no problem of losing control at all. When he reached the upper gun deck, he suddenly ducked his head to avoid a flying cannonball. With a pull on the reins, the ghost horse lowered its head, smashed the gun door and rushed into the cabin, knocking away all the sailors along the way. Byron lay on the horse's back and followed the horse out of the gun port on the other side. Then the process was repeated, turning the strongest second-class battleship in the fleet upside down. The angry Old Norwich roared behind him and had to summon the Marines on the ship through the legal network to chase and intercept. It was not until Byron rushed onto the open deck with the momentum of a chariot crushing everything that the fleet commander's guards finally blocked his way. However, in a rainstorm, even with a rain cover on an ordinary flintlock rifle, the attack density of the bullets was greatly reduced. The sporadic lead bullets hit Byron's full armor and bounced off immediately without any killing power. Byron simply combined man and horse into one, using the horse's power and sweeping across with his lance, causing a hail of broken limbs and blood among the escort team. It was only at this time that Old Norwich finally caught up. He stepped on the ground with his right foot, and his body accelerated instantly, almost turning into an afterimage. He suddenly swung out a cross strike with his superb silver cross swordsmanship. Cut it off. Fueled by the anger that had been suppressed for a long time, he wanted to cut Byron and his horse into 2 pieces with one sword. He was born into the Blood Cross Knights controlled by the York family, and is a Fortress Sequence Blood Cross Knight who has reached the limit of the 3rd Order. This sword was extremely powerful, and Byron, who was a fake 3rd-level sword, didn't dare to take it head-on. However, although he was riding on a horse, his body was as light as a phantom. He squeezed the horse's belly, and the ghost horse dodged the sword like a puff of smoke. At the same time, the lance in Byron's hand was wrapped in wind and thunder, and he smashed the opponent's head with a sky slash. This move is to launch an attack from outside the opponent's attack range when you have an absolute advantage in attack distance. Distance corresponds to the 4 basic principles: judgment, distance, time, and position. The attack is close at hand, but the opponent is far away. Combined with the storm swordsmanship's control of time, it is as fast as lightning. Norwich did not expect that the agility of this ghost horse was completely beyond common sense. Some people even believe that it is not a horse, but a great pirate who has studied the footsteps of mountain goats for many years. He quickly crouched and rolled forward, using his superb sword skills to change moves and slash, trying to get close to Byron's side and cut off his horse's legs. But Byron's offhand weapon fired. The hot steel balls not only interrupted Norwich's attack rhythm, but also penetrated the open deck, sending several gunners on the gun deck below into the sky. In just a moment's effort, the 2 of them exchanged 3 moves in the heavy rain. Just as Byron was extremely familiar with the House of York, so too was York familiar with the House of Lancaster. There is no need to look at the face at all, just by looking at the traces of swordsmanship that are engraved into the bone marrow, you can recognize the other person at a glance. Old Norwich gnashed his teeth and said word by word, "Storm swordsmanship, Lancaster, it's you." At this time, Byron was blocked by him, and hundreds of marines on the ship were rushing over from all directions. Norwich's aura became stronger and stronger. The knight's ability at the 3rd level Knight Commander: you can gather the strength of your knights. The stronger the strength and the more people there are, the better the effect. He can also bestow various aura abilities upon his subordinates, allowing them to unleash a combat power far greater than the sum of their parts. Only this 3rd level ability can surpass the pirate class's Pirate Flag, Chapter 83. At the same time as the marines surrounded him, the captain of the ship, another 3rd level transcendent, also surrounded Byron from the other side of the deck. Byron did not hesitate to replace the knight's gun with the knight's gun. He sped up his horse towards the windward side of the ship and shouted, "Be an honest man, and as a knight, you should perform the art of drawing your spear with dignity." Sonata of Sorrow. Organ black and white keys. The 6 pipes sounded together, tearing a bloody hole before the marines completed the encirclement and breaking out easily. He jumped straight from the high open deck into the rough sea. The moment he broke away from the King Edward, he raised his hand and scattered a large number of octopus silver coins stained with little Norwich's blood. All of them fell onto the open deck of this 2nd-tier ship, which was littered with corpses. Black Mass ceremony is now completely completed. The strong winds over the fleet gradually stopped. It seemed that even the wind and rain here felt a little uneasy. The sailors on the deck also shuddered, as if they were suddenly targeted by some ferocious predator. If a transcendent person enters deep meditation, he will find that the black shadow in the Sea of Source is slowly loosening the anchor bay. It then rolled its tentacles towards the straight fleet. In contrast, Byron's ghost horse was so magical that it did not sink to the bottom, but walked on the waves. Until it was 1 nautical mile away at a high speed. Just as he reunited with Violet, who had been waiting on the back of the man-eating shark for a long time, his wild hunt suit disappeared in a burst of flames. If Violet hadn't been quick enough to catch him, he would have been swept away by the waves. "How are you? Byron, are you okay?" He did not ask how the task of diverting the blame was completed, nor did he try to find out the source of the magical ability that was similar to the wild hunt. The first thing he cared about was whether he was injured. Byron felt warm inside and gave her a big smile, making a gesture that everything was going well. The burst power of Wild Hunt only lasts 3 minutes. After showing off his prowess in front of others for a while, his whole body was in pain. If he hadn't leaned on Violet, he wouldn't have been able to stand up. But the gains from this trip were huge. Most importantly, after witnessing the touch of the Kraken with one's own eyes and completing the decryption of this historical event, the last trump card is also completely ready. A simple accident could make things worse or better, but with this thing added on, you really should bow out. A person's courage often comes from his trump card, as the saying goes, there is nothing to fear when one is confident. All objects remain at rest or in uniform linear motion when no external forces act on them. This is why no matter how powerful a being is, it always needs someone to give it a hand at the critical moment. Although Byron was always taking risks, he always kept the most important card in his hand. First entry, Historical Revisionist: 1, the anchor in you is more secure. The person with whom you have an anchored connection will also be more likely to be drawn into a vortex of history with you, approaching all kinds of unknowns and secrets. Of course, if the anchors are strong enough and there are enough of them, they might be able to pull you out of the vortex directly. Byron found that as they fought side by side, the anchor between him and Violet became noticeably stronger, catching up with the relatives and friends who were still alive. The most important one is the second one as compensation, when participating in secret events with a historical influence of more than 30. You can summon a one-time holy relic related to a region or nation from history at any time to help you correct history. The higher the degree of decryption, the stronger the effect of the relic will be. An event can only be used once. Byron stretched out his hand and gently scooped it into the air. When he opened his palm, there was a rusty iron nail in his palm, like a nail that had been forcibly bent. As a third-level craftsman, Violet recognized at a glance that this was an iron nail specially used for nailing horseshoes. But he did not make a sound to disturb Byron. When the decryption density of the conspiracy of the Navy reached 100% just now, he already knew what the holy relic he could summon was. First level holy relic, the iron nail that destroys a nation. After seeing its capabilities, I have already thought of specific uses. At the moment when the touch of the Kraken swept back towards the fleet, It is the right time to take advantage of someone's misfortune and add insult to injury. Byron held the nail high above his head and began to sing a ballad that is very famous among the Bay people. A nail is missing, a horseshoe is lost, a horseshoe is lost, a war horse is lost, a war horse is lost, a battle is lost, a battle is lost, a country is lost. Chapter 94. Chain Collapse. As Byron sang the story of first-level holy relic, the iron nail that destroyed a nation, the ordinary rusted iron nail suddenly emitted an ominous bloody light. In the blood, scenes emerged that looked like real stories reenacting history. The battle flags were unfurled, the knights charged, the horses stumbled, and the throne changed hands. This is the Battle of Bosworth. Violet, who was standing right behind Byron, saw it most clearly. This iron nail clearly carries a historical event that is very famous among the people of Taiwan and even in half of the old continent, the Battle of Bosworth. The incident took place in the Kingdom of Hattings in the Channel Islands, and it was also a battle for national destiny between the king and the rebels. At that time, muskets and cannons had not yet been invented, and it was still an era of cold weapons where knights were king. As the main force in the battle, the knights not only need to wear full heavy armor, but also need a tall horse to carry them into battle. Before the war, the king decided to lead his troops to fight the rebels himself. For this purpose, he ordered his groom to find the most famous blacksmith to nail horseshoes for his beloved warhorse. Naturally, the blacksmith did not dare to delay and started working as soon as he received the task. But after the blacksmith had nailed 3 horseshoes, he found that the nails he had prepared were not enough. Due to the urgency of his superiors, he had no time to make new nails, and in the end he could only use a low-quality iron nail to hammer in the horseshoe. Although there is no visible difference in appearance, hidden dangers have already been deeply buried. So, when the two armies started the decisive battle on the Bosworth plain. The moment before, the king was leading the charge, waving his sword and commanding the entire army to attack, shining like a god of war. The next moment, he suddenly stumbled. The king fell heavily to the ground, and the una-iled horseshoe flew far away. The frightened warhorse got up from the ground and limped away, leaving the king alone on the battlefield. In the chaos, the king was surrounded by enemy troops and eventually ended up being captured and beheaded. Because of a small iron nail, he became the famous last king, announcing the demise of a dynasty and a country in a somewhat absurd way. Countless historians have long concluded that this famous historical event illustrates that there are universal intrinsic connections between things. Even if a small detail is not done well, it may trigger a series of disastrous consequences. Effect can direct a series of isolated accidental events toward the worst outcome for the enemy. The upper limit of power is the destruction of the kingdom. In other words, if there is a chance that things could go wrong, no matter how small the chance is, they will always go in the worst direction. The more complex the system is and the higher the level of chaos, the more serious the consequences will be. Otherwise, there may be no lethality at all. This is a treasure with a very high upper limit but a very low lower limit. It all depends on the specific usage scenario. I, the Wild Hunt, will judge you, the traitors to the Bay peoples and the kingdom. Byron did not forget to shout to the fleet. With the help of the conch shell that Violet had brought out, the sound penetrated the rain and spread far across the entire Channel fleet. Raise the legendary level of this title by 1 level. Of course, the premise of all this is that someone can return to the kingdom of Hastings alive. Then, history repeated itself. The rusty iron nail, which had lost its physical form, completely turned into a streak of blood-red light and disappeared at Byron's fingertips. It instantly shot into the flagship King Edward, which housed the main body of the Kraken's Touch. At this time, on the open deck of the battleship, Commander Old Norwich, who had taken back the Iron-Bone Dragon Nematode exoskeleton knight armor, had a slightly distorted voice. "Throw it out! Throw all the silver coins on the deck into the sea!" He no longer had time to avenge his only son, or even think about what judgment the Wild Hunt had given him. He hurriedly ordered the soldiers to throw the 30 octopus silver coins scattered all over the deck into the sea. This thing was originally forged by his own people. How could he not know what the consequences would be once all of them were gathered? I was wondering if the Black Mass ceremony should have been completed in Anchor Bay long ago, and it would have become the strongest anchor point for the Kraken's Touch to lock onto its prey. At this moment, I finally understood why the Kraken's Touch could not swallow the people of the bay. How can you play tricks when your enemy knows your core plan so well? The reason why a conspiracy is that it cannot be exposed to the light of day. Once it is exposed, all previous efforts may be wasted or even backfire. In a panic, old Norwich hated Redbeard, who was always causing trouble but not helping anything, to the core. Fortunately, I didn't follow your advice and enter the maze just now. Even 30 octopus silver coins fell into the hands of the enemy. Can I really believe that a fool like you successfully snatched the position of governor? Most likely, they were taken advantage of by those damn Taiwanese people. You'd better die miserably this time, otherwise I will punish you with the Blood Eagle punishment and make your life miserable for the rest of your life. In fact, no matter how tragically Redbeard died, old Norwich could only make some harsh remarks at this time. The Kraken's touch responded to the ritual call much faster than they could pick up the octopus silver from the cracks in the deck. With strong winds, rain, and huge waves as the medium, countless tentacles that were originally invisible to the naked eye have gradually revealed their shapes. A flash of blazing white lightning streaked across the night sky. Byron and Violet, who were a mile away, clearly saw a huge figure covered with tentacles flash past the top of the second-class ship. The Navy standing on the deck saw it more clearly and with more impact. Even many mortal soldiers with sharp spiritual perception but low anchoring level could not bear the moment of eye contact, so they pulled out their flintlock rifles and pulled the trigger on their own heads. Also, because water entered the barrel and wet the gunpowder, it could not be successfully ignited. This made them even more frantic and they used their pistols as hammers, smashing their brains out with extremely brutal blows. Even the companions around them tried their best to stop them, it was useless. As time went on, more and more soldiers joined him and chaos ensued on the battleship. Damn it, a natural disaster has come. The fleet commander, captain, and other senior officials who knew the inside story were livid, but they were powerless and could only passively face the trial. The gap between them and the touch of the Kraken is greater than the gap between ants and humans. The so-called ritual is nothing more than a group of ants that accidentally figured out a pattern and formed an SNAB in places where humans must pass. If humans are in a good mood, they may find it very interesting and give them some breadcrumbs. But next time if I make this gesture that makes me want to get beaten again, the other person may happen to be in a bad mood. Maybe what you receive is not breadcrumbs, but a pool of hot urine or a pot of boiling water. Norwich is still hoping for a 1 in a million chance of luck. They were completely unaware that the iron nail of national destruction had already quietly taken effect in a corner that they could not see. Byron initially lurks on the battleship's lower gun deck. The gun ports on both sides should have been nailed shut from the inside and the gun port bolts inserted. Then, use the caulking material made of pine oil mixed with hemp to fill the gaps on the four sides of the gun port and strictly perform waterproofing work. Especially on the leeward side, because the hull was tilted and completely submerged under the sea surface, the 14 gun ports on this side were also under greater pressure. At this moment, under the influence of an unknown force, one of the iron gun port bolts that locked the gun port began to rust rapidly at a speed far exceeding normal. After just a few breaths, it broke into two pieces as if it had been soaked in sea water for several years, and fell to the ground with a clang. Under the impact of the strong wind and rain outside, the twisted material used to fill the gaps is simply not enough to withstand the pressure of the sea water. Bang! With a crisp sound like a bottle cap opening, the gun port was suddenly opened by the waves, and the cold sea water rushed in through the gun port. The ship began to tilt further. This layer had been damaged by Byron earlier, and many of the cables that originally firmly secured the gun carriage had already broken. As the ship tilted, these 32-pound guns, whose barrels alone weighed 2.5 tons, immediately slid on the tilted gun deck on their gun carriages. Especially those guns that slid over from the starboard side of the windward side. Because of their longer acceleration distance, when they slid from one side to the other, they crashed into big holes on the opposite side of the ship. Let the water ingress situation get out of control. To make matters worse, the numerous guns piled up on the port side caused the center of gravity to shift again. More seawater continued to pour in step by step, and the water level at the leeward gun position became higher and higher. All this happened too suddenly, and the damage control personnel who rushed over after hearing the news were unable to get close to the port side to carry out the leak plugging operation. Hurry, let's push all the guns back to the starboard side and bring the battleship back to balance first. Under the command of the officers, the soldiers tried their best to push the 32-pound guns that had been piled on the port side to the starboard side. But how easy is it? At this time, the hull was severely tilted to the left, forming a steep ramp. It is beyond human power to push nearly 20 cannons weighing more than 2.5 tons in the surging water. A second-level extraordinary person wanted to be the hero who saved the entire ship, but he accidentally slipped and was run over by the heavy artillery cart. The desperate wails instantly destroyed the other sailors' already limited morale and sanity. It's over, we're done. What made everyone lose their minds was the cold sea water had already poured into the bottom cabin through the passages, cracks, and the holes that had been created during the fight between Byron and Norwich. The touch of the kraken, which absolutely must not be soaked in sea water, was really soaked in sea water. The painted pottery jar originally used by overseas natives to seal it, after coming into contact with sea water, melted away quickly as if it were made of yellow mud. The medicine inside was bubbling like boiling water. The highly corrupted pale tentacle expanded and contracted, rapidly swallowing up sea water, growing larger and more active. Then from the broken edge, 1 gave birth to 2, 2 gave birth to 4, and 4 gave birth to 8. Soon, densely packed tentacles filled the bottom hold of the battleship. New choices are presented to this existence that is difficult to measure with human common sense. Should I return to the sea immediately to regain my freedom, or have a big meal first and then embrace freedom, or something else? At this moment, a stream of water came from nowhere and quietly brought an old flute to its front. A dexterous tentacle with independent instincts wrapped it around, and the mouth parts in the suction cup naturally played a song that it was most familiar with. Yes, without a doubt, that was the signal for dinner. The next moment, endless pale tentacles turned into a torrent and swept along the ship's passageway toward the upper deck. Chapter 95. The End and the Beginning. A mile away from the sea, Byron's face turned pale after he threw out the iron nail of destruction, and he sat directly on the back of the man-eating shark. Violet, who had been supporting Byron, also knelt down behind him so that he could lean on her more securely. But he did not feel that he was taking care of this ally who shared the same suffering as him. Instead, he sincerely felt that Byron, who was 3 years younger than him, was shielding him from the wind and rain. And it really blocked it. Holding his hand, which was a little cold after the continuous outbursts in the storm, I couldn't help but ask with concern. Is this a holy relic passed down from your Lancaster ancestors? Does it cost a lot to use it? Of course, those holy relics also have side effects. It's just that some are serious and some are mild. Normally, the user needs to bear the corresponding destiny, or the corresponding historical responsibility. For example, the historical responsibility of the holy relic, the world's first matchlock gun. It completely changed the form of warfare that had existed for thousands of years and realized the revolution in thermal weapons. The user cannot use melee cold weapons such as swords or knives in his life, otherwise he will die by the sword. The side effects of the Charles Rich list in Anchor Bay are relatively subtle. It is nothing more than the desire for money, fame, and striving to become the rich people on the list. Byron glanced at the detailed record in the logbook, shook his head vigorously, and replied with a smile, "No, there are no side effects. On the contrary, I feel great now. The historical responsibility that the iron nail that destroys a country needs to fulfill is to make the user engage in the great cause of destroying a country and replacing it. For good people, this thing would make them live in fear for the rest of their lives. But for Byron, it's not just a price, it's his life. Retreat, let's retreat back to Anchor Bay as soon as possible and don't stay at sea any longer. If it only sank a ship, Nail of Destruction wouldn't be worthy of being called a first-class holy relic." Byron held onto Violet's hand, stepped on the 9-meter-long man-eating shark beneath him, and rushed back to Anchor Bay at full speed as if he was running for his life. When the sailors on the lower gun deck reported the situation of the ship and asked for help from the captain and the extraordinary people, the order issued by Fleet Commander Norwich was, "Lower the boat, and the officer will go first. Let the nearest warship St. Lawrence approach to provide support. The blood of the York family is extremely noble, and he has no obsession with sinking with the ship like the Bay People pirates. The most important thing is that although his only son was killed in front of him, he was still young and could still have children. I also know that the bloodthirsty cult possesses a piece of knowledge that can make people immortal, the ritual that can brew the blood of immortality, Scarlet Holy Grail. If I get this treasure, what does a son who can only live for a few decades matter?" As one of the few members of the York family who practiced black magic and had in-depth contact with the overseas sect, he had a broader vision and greater ambition. Not to mention being a son, even the position of king cannot compare to eternal life. How could he die here in vain like those lowly sailors? It was a felony for an ordinary officer to abandon an expensive warship at will, but York didn't care. "Yes, Commander." Upon hearing the order, the trusted sailor immediately lifted the canvas covering the boat. The boat was well protected and no heavy rain entered. "Lower the davit from the port side, which is already listing badly. Lowering it from the right side will hit the side below." The highest-ranking commanders, captains, noble officers and their servants climbed onto the small boat that could only accommodate a dozen people along the stepping stones on both sides. The sailors on the warship turned the pulley and lowered them to the sea surface little by little. After receiving the signal, the nearby warships also began to move closer to provide support. No matter how high the level of a warship is, there are only a few small boats on it, which can accommodate at most dozens of people. The limited space in the boat was even used to raise poultry, and it was impossible to accommodate more people to escape. What should ordinary sailors do? An empty wine barrel might be their best option. If you are lucky enough to survive the big waves and successfully get to other warships, you may be able to save your life. May the Creator bless them. But they wanted to leave, but the new owner of the battleship did not agree. Countless tentacles squeezed out from the depths of the cabin and quickly swallowed up all the crew members they met along the way. Unlike before when he only took away the souls of his prey from his dreams, now his flesh and blood are also completely dissolved and digested as a part of himself. As the size of the touch of the Kraken grew larger, a layer of dreamy white mist emerged. This second-level ship seemed to be looming, as if in a dream. The screams from the remaining crew members in the distance were somewhat distorted. Help! God! I saw God! Man came from the sea and will one day return to the sea. Please let me become one with you. I'd rather die than become a monster. Some people face things beyond their expectations, have a mental breakdown, and jump into the sea crying. Some people believe they have seen the real God, and kneel down devoutly to become a part of Him. Some people committed suicide out of despair. But no matter what their attitude is, it doesn't matter to the touch of the Kraken at all, and there is no additional reaction. In the midst of such chaos and madness, the water flowed more and more violently from the gun deck into the bottom hold, hitting the port side of the ship's bottom and ruthlessly pulling the battleship to the leeward side. The tall masts and sails of the warship first pressed the small boat on the port side that fell at the back into the water, and then it also fell into the water like a landslide. A big wave hit, and the wooden hull, which was originally very resistant to sinking and could at least float on the water for a long time, disappeared on the sea in an instant. As if it had never existed. Row quickly, and return immediately after boarding the St. Lawrence. Norwich, in shock, knew that an invincible monster had been unleashed. How to clean up the mess is a matter for the future. The most important thing now is how to escape. He quickly picked up the long oar and rowed hard with the rowers. Just as they were about to approach the third-level ship closest to them, toot toot. A very familiar flute sound suddenly came from under the opponent's ship. As old Norwich watched, his spine shivering, a dreamy mist emerged from the side of the third-level ship, and countless creepy thick tentacles danced, sweeping up the entire battleship and dragging it into another underwater world. As he looked blankly at the next battleship, as expected, the sound of the shepherd's flute rang out again, as if the long-dead Chief Justice had picked up the flute and started playing it again. The third battleship also disappeared on the sea. Next, there was no need for him, the fleet commander, to issue any orders. The dozens of remaining warships in the entire fleet no longer cared about the storm around them and immediately scattered and fled towards the nearest Eternal Night Peninsula. As a race that left the ocean billions of years ago, only land can truly bring them a sense of security. While they were fleeing, from time to time, strange flute sounds were heard from under the warship, and then the warship disappeared without a trace in the fog. As they walked further and further away, just when old Norwich thought that the out-of-control touch of the Kraken had been led away by a larger target, suddenly, I heard the sound of a flute, sounding right under my feet. Hiss! Looking down, I saw an indescribable creature covered with tentacles in the reflection of the sea. It was holding a shepherd's flute and playing the most familiar flute sound with the mouth parts growing on its tentacles. Along with the sound of the flute, the knowledge from the Kraken's touch, like a torrent, continued to penetrate into his brain. The most repeated phrase is, "If you don't keep your promise, you will be punished." Second-level Holy Relic, Pied Piper's shepherd's flute effect, plays a hypnotic sound that can cause harm to all mentally challenged people. So if a being is mentally ill, or has no human mind at all, what would happen if he played a shepherd's flute? The extraordinary people all know that cursed objects are accompanied by large-scale casualties and tend to be negative. Holy relics carry a great piece of history or heroic deeds and tend to be positive. This shepherd's flute, which eliminated rat infestation but also killed a city of children, is somewhere in between the two. One is a crime, the other is a punishment. Represents its most fundamental historical mission: if you don't keep your promise, you will be punished. The price the Chief Justice paid was that he had to try a fraudster every 7 days. Now the shepherd's flute has fallen into the hands of the touch of the kraken, which has no human concept of right and wrong, good and evil, and has even been assimilated into its part. This historical mission naturally became its fundamental code of conduct when hunting thereafter. Priority will be given to hunting down all those who have committed crimes such as betrayal, demolition, and ingratitude in this ocean. As it happens, the Strait Fleet is not only originally marked by the Black Mass ritual, but is also the largest group of traders in the North Sea. The Kingdom of Hastings is an island country, and the army belongs to local lords, which can give them enough sense of security. The most powerful navy, however, is aimed at foreign enemies and is mainly funded by the king. In name, it was his personal private army, and the object of their loyalty was not the country but the king himself. They were even given the prefix royal. The army was fine, but every naval soldier who followed the York family in rebellion betrayed the oath of allegiance they took when they joined the army. Having served as an official in the previous dynasty and received its salary, if you rebel against the previous dynasty again, you would be guilty of the original sin of treason. It is equivalent to stacking a double layer of buff. Do not. Amid the screams of Norwich and the noble officers on the ship, the boat disappeared on the sea in the moment the fog rose. The two third-level transcendents were completely powerless to resist. Byron, who had already fled back to Anchor Bay, stood on the bow of the Golden Hind and took in all of this. As the one-time owner of the nation-destroying Iron Nail, Byron also received information about the final result and the touch of the kraken. Take a deep breath. Although it wasn't perfect, the Battle of Anchor Bay is finally over. Some members of this Strait Fleet may be able to escape, but their number is definitely not large. And from then on, whenever York's navy entered the North Sea, it had to be on guard against an elusive and invincible enemy. The fleet's range of activities is restricted, and the Navy Department's proposal to recruit foreign aid and recruit privateers should be put on the agenda soon. Right, looking forward to our next collaboration. This relic is only a one-time item, but the consequences of this battle will trigger a series of subsequent reactions. A nail led to the destruction of the Channel Fleet. But wasn't the destruction of the Channel Fleet another nail in the coffin for York at that time? As a result of the chain reaction, the battle in Anchor Bay may be both the end and the beginning of another system collapse. Chapter 96, Weddings and Funerals, Joy Leads to Sorrow. Southeast of the Channel Islands, capital Kingston, Oasis Palace. This is a huge building complex consisting of more than 600 halls and rooms. The Georgian-style spire roof, the exquisite porch and columns carved from white marble are absolutely symmetrical with the annexes on both sides. With the orderly 6 pairs of 6 glass panes, it is transparent and bright, and the lines are simple and orderly. Although it does not have overly luxurious decorations, it has a timeless symmetrical beauty and is also the embodiment of order that is most respected by all human countries. Neat, elegant, dignified, and noble, this is how the world under the protection of the silver law should be. In the old world, whether it is a church or a palace, it is rare to see such heretical buildings with asymmetrical layouts. At this moment, Ganquin Palace had already changed its owner. Not only has the most conspicuous royal emblem changed from red roses to white roses, but even the varieties of roses planted in the garden have been changed. Strive to completely erase all traces of the former owner from even the smallest detail. And today, luxurious carriages carried their owners into the palace. The palace gates were wide open, and the newly decorated Oasis Palace was used for the first time by the new King Edward IV to entertain the Yorkist party's capable leaders and their families. The night in Kingston comes much later than in Anchor Bay. When the Channel Fleet launched an attack under the cover of night, a grand banquet had just begun. The table was filled with delicacies from the Kingdom of Iris and the Holy Silver Empire, beef stew in red wine, fish soup in Marseille, tripe of Seine, baked snails, roasted quail. Desserts included panna cotta, ice cream scoops, and quiche Lorraine, but there was no trace of any native Hastings dishes. Obviously, no chef would serve something like that to annoy the guests on such a festive occasion. The banquet hall was filled with the aroma of food and a joyful atmosphere. "Count, I heard that your son is already a second-level lawmaster, right?" "Yes, he is currently on duty in the First Fleet of the Channel Fleet. When he returns, he will probably serve as a senior judge of the King's Bench of the High Court. My little daughter Belinda admires defenders of order like them the most. Why not let these young people meet each other if there is a chance?" In the various noble families in the banquet hall, whether married or unmarried, many people were doing the same thing, either through their elders or in person. Especially those noble women who were dressed up to perfection, they could make the most of a fan. Only by hanging out in social places for a long time can you understand their secret language. If a lady holds a fan and slowly fans her chest, it means that I don't have a lover yet, and you should chase me quickly. If she closes the fan and puts it on the tip of her nose, it means that I am very unhappy about you flirting with other women just now, so you'd better be careful. Open and close the fan, then point to the garden, which means, dear, go over there and wait for me, I will come to find you later, and then we will, full, warm and lustful. Now is the time to enjoy the fruits of victory. If we still can't do whatever we want, then wouldn't my rebellion have been in vain? It is foreseeable that marriages within the York party will become very frequent in the future. As it gets darker, the hymn fantasy praises the Creator, the march of kingship praises the power of the Lord, and the march of majesty demonstrates the power of the army. The large pipe organ, in the hands of a third-level musician of the palace sequence, plays one classic piece after another, and countless notes form a magnificent picture. The atmosphere of the banquet was completely pushed to a climax. Led by the waiter, all the guests came to one side of the banquet hall, holding their wine glasses, in front of a white wall. As a servant activated the mechanism, an entire wall slowly disappeared into the wainscoting inside the wall. King Edward IV, dressed in neat military uniform and with a dignified look on his face, appeared in front of the guests with his most core royal members. All the great nobles were deeply moved by this ritualistic scene. In the past, only Henry VI and his wife, the prince, his brother Prince of Thornburg, and a very small number of Lancasters would appear in this way. If it weren't for the accident, Byron would have made his grand debut in this way at his coming-of-age ceremony. But now it seems that the era of Lancaster has really come to an end. Immediately, huge applause and cheers rang out in the banquet hall. Long live your Majesty! God blesses York! The law is rooted in the collective consciousness of mankind, which is essentially the human heart. When people are united and everyone believes that a king is destined to be the king and is invincible, then he is most likely the king. The hearts of the Yorkists were more united than ever before at this moment, and even the iron law of royal power became visibly stronger. The princes and princesses were still young, so they were quickly led by the Queen to the side hall to rest. Edward IV, his brother George and Richard, the three most core heirs of the House of York, became the core of the entire banquet. Even the new Archbishop of Canterbury sent by the Church took the initiative to approach them and have a cordial conversation with them. The Lord is always watching over you, the favoured ones of the three phantom sons. Your Majesty, the Lord crowns you for your virtue and perseverance, and allows you to lead the people of Haddings to bathe in the Lord's grace. Edward IV did not dare to neglect the highest-ranking clergyman in the kingdom and bowed his head humbly. Thank you, Your Excellency the Archbishop. I promise to you that I will continue to support you in teaching believers, maintaining the purity of doctrine, and eradicating all heresy. Anchor Bay, which refuses to convert, is my gift to the Church. This banquet is also a celebration banquet, and you will soon receive news from the front line. Then I'll wait and see. In public, although the two spoke briefly, they undoubtedly announced some unknown insider trading. This is also the reason why Redbeard felt that the Church's attitude was somewhat intriguing after discovering that the York family possessed forbidden knowledge. Chapter 54. The other nobles did not feel at all surprised to see this harmonious picture, which was completely different from the Lancastrian era. Because before the final battle, a magical sight of three phantom suns suddenly appeared in the sky above the York family. 3 phantom days, that is, 3 suns appeared. Edward declared that the 3 suns in the sky were the best proof that the Creator blessed the House of York. It not only represents the Trinity of the Creator in the Church, but also represents the 3 heirs of the House of York, Edward, George, and Richard. This also means that the York family's usurpation of the throne was strongly supported by the Church, or at least the Diocese of Haddings. Now the York family naturally has to return the favour. You know, in the past, although the royal family of Hastings converted to the Creator, as an island off the old continent, the relationship with the Church has always been tense. The Holy Office Commission Act was once enacted, stipulating that the election of bishops and other clergy in the country is not subject to interference from the Pope. Later, legislation was enacted to prohibit unauthorized exercise of religious judicial power and to prohibit citizens from appealing outside the country. Violators would be deprived of their citizenship. By the time of Mad King Henry VI, the Lancaster family's attitude towards the Church was equally cold. Just slightly better than the diehards in Anchor Bay. The York family even had reliable information that Lancaster was secretly supporting a new separatist faction in the Church in order to strengthen the royal power. Obviously, who can be united, including the royal family, ethnic groups, and the Supreme Church. Where there are people, there is struggle. In particular, the vast opportunities provided by the Age of Discovery caused these contradictions to erupt in a concentrated manner. But from now on, Hastings will only have one voice. The Yorkist nobles celebrated the support of the Church. With the recognition of a powerful force whose status is above the royal families of various countries, the situation of their new ruling group will be much better. Everything is moving in a good direction. Next to it, I heard the conversation between the king and the archbishop about the pirate port of Iron Anchor Bay. A great nobleman toasted to the jeweled noble lady beside him, "Marquise, you look exceptionally radiant today. Although Lord Norwich is absent due to his mission, we are all with him even though we are thousands of miles away." It is not certain whether she was a glamorous man, but her husband, Norwich York, was the youngest uncle of Edward IV. After York successfully rose from a noble family to a royal family, it was not impossible for him to be awarded the title of Duke when he returned with a great victory. The Marquise may not be very beautiful, but the halo above her head is really beautiful. "Thank you, Count. Wherever your Majesty's banner points, the House of York will be invincible. I believe my husband and son will soon add their own glory to the honor of the White Rose." "Of course, I always believe that." The two vested interests of the York family smiled at each other and raised their glasses with others. "To our Majesty! Victory to the kingdom!" Edward IV also smiled and raised the red wine in his hand. "Cheers to our warriors on the front line! Victory also belongs to everyone here." Before he finished speaking, a messenger on a fast horse came galloping outside the door. "Haha, our military report is here. Quick, report the battle results on the front line to all the York family's closest friends, gentlemen and ladies." Richard, the youngest of the three brothers, had his eyes light up, and he immediately gave the order, apparently never imagining any other possibility. Led by the waiter, the messenger delivered the urgent report from the Admiralty to the king. He glanced at the expectant expressions of the king's three brothers and the guests, hesitated for a moment, and then whispered in a difficult tone a piece of bad news that could not be concealed at all. "Your Majesty, the First Fleet of the Strait Fleet, which is currently on a mission in Anchor Bay, has sent us an urgent military report. Just now, the secret weapon code named Natural Disaster accidentally went out of control, and all the main battleships above level 3 in the fleet were wiped out. Only a few cruisers managed to land on the Evernight Peninsula. Witnesses confirmed that the fleet commander, General Norwich York, and nearly 20 other law mages on board were all killed in the battle. Moreover, they all said that they heard it with their own ears. This was the judgment of the Wild Hunt in the legend of the Bay people." Upon hearing this bad news, even though Edward IV had experienced countless storms and more than one failure, his throat couldn't help but feel a little sweet. His body swayed and he almost fell down. The fleet was destroyed and all the members died in the battle. The old lady from Norwich, who had just been hoping that her husband would go a step further and let her become a duchess, suddenly felt dizzy and fainted. And she was not the only one who fainted on the spot. Most of the guests here don't know about the secret weapon code named Natural Disaster. But he knew that the lawyer that his family had trained with great difficulty was also on the ship. All of them were buried in Anchor Bay along with the Channel Fleet. No more, all gone. No, that's not true. There are more than a dozen lawyers that only the great noble families are qualified to train, and naturally they also correspond to more than a dozen large families. None of them were left out of the party. Following closely behind the messenger, servants from each family also hurried into the palace to deliver the news that the life gems of their family members had been shattered. They no longer had any hope in their hearts, and no one knew how many of them fainted in an instant. "Hurry, doctor, please ask the doctor to come over." For most people, it is simply too much joy and then too much sorrow, falling from heaven to hell in an instant. The first time Ganquin Palace opened its doors, the wedding banquet turned into a funeral banquet. As luck would have it, and as if foreshadowing something, the fleet's flagship was named the King Edward. A devastating defeat caused the people, who had just been unprecedentedly united, to fall apart. Under the light, even the gilded royal emblem in the banquet hall seemed to dim a little. The news of the Battle of Anchor Bay did not only reach Edward IV. It was more like the wind that spread across the entire North Sea coast in just a few days. Some people are sad and worried, while others are crying for joy. To the north of the Channel Islands, adjacent to the earldom of Greenville, Prince Saul Unberg of the Byron family. In a manor where the York family's private army was imprisoned. Catherine Greenville, the last member of this ancient family, pressed a copy of the Lighthouse Weekly, which recorded the beginning and end of the Battle of Anchor Bay, against her towering chest. His eyes were slightly red, his nose was a little sour, and he muttered to himself. "You're really still alive, little brat. I knew it. I knew a scourge like you wouldn't die so easily. That's great. It's really great." Chapter 97, Flower of the North, Strategy Direction. The news of the Battle of Anchor Bay completely dominated the topic of discussion among the coastal countries around the North Sea during this period. As the protagonist of one side, Hastings naturally bore the brunt of the attack. Among them, the Lighthouse Federation, an international guild organization mainly composed of lighthouse sequence extraordinary people, specially printed a lighthouse weekly, Chapter 69. He seemed particularly authoritative, as if he had witnessed the entire Anchor Bay crisis with his own eyes. In particular, a certain insider who believed that one should leave his name behind when doing good deeds disguised himself and accepted the interview, basically restoring the truth on the surface. Redbeard and the privateers under the control of the York family are lurking in Iron Anchor Bay as spies. Intends to seize the position of overseer and control of the pirate code, and open the maze for the subsequent arrival of the Hastings Navy. This despicable act was stopped by the Taiwanese Princess Violet and a suspected third-level extraordinary being Wild Hunt. Later, in the chaos of fighting between the two sides, an ultra-specification being summoned by the York family accidentally lost control and destroyed the entire Channel fleet. Those who play with fire will get burned. This newspaper has reliable information that the York family most likely used the same method to defeat their rival for the throne, the Lancaster family. And now York has lost it. In addition, during the chaos between the two sides, some privateers and free pirates took advantage of the chaos to escape from Anchor Bay. But the North Sea was not safe at this time. This newspaper would like to remind passing ships throughout the North Sea that the supersized existence may appear anywhere, and especially the treacherous ones must be extra careful. It is said that the Lancaster party member wanted by the York family, Devil's Son, once appeared in Anchor Bay, and it is suspected that they have reached a cooperation. After seeing this newspaper, the soldiers who were responsible for guarding the Greenville family estate became a little panicked. Iris is always looking to avenge its defeat in the 100 Years' War, and the kingdom's coastal defense is under tremendous pressure. I heard that every noble family in the capital is holding a funeral. I also heard that the church issued a decree requiring the diocese to conduct a thorough investigation. Is there really anything wrong? Although with those Hall of Fame artists who shouted, "Humanity can accomplish great things," a series of literary and artistic movements were launched to break the shackles of church ideology. Various bans, including those related to names, were gradually relaxed and abolished in 1453. But the York family's behavior still seriously violated taboos and will most likely lead to further accountability from the church. Most of the fears of mortals come from the unknown. Originally, many people did not know why the House of York was able to destroy Lancaster. Now, after Byron had decoded the secret himself, he also uncovered the York family's hidden secrets. What's worse, he threw the tiger skin into the sea and could never be retrieved. The dual pressures from both the religious and secular levels made the situation faced by the York family even more difficult. Many people no longer believed that the House of York was truly destined to rule. Even the soldiers at the bottom couldn't help but have an idea in their minds: the kingdom is now plagued by internal and external troubles. Will Lancaster come back to attack us one day? Therefore, whether in the earldom of Greenville or in the territories of other Lancaster nobles, the soldiers who were vassal states of York subconsciously became much more polite to the prisoners. In particular, the officers on guard knew that the previous Earl of Greenville had great reputation in the kingdom of Hastings. About 40 years ago, it was he who assisted the previous King Henry V in defeating the kingdom of Iris, making Henry V the regent of Iris for a time. Not only did she marry the daughter of King Charles VI of Iris at the time, giving birth to Henry VI and Prince of Thornburg, but she also obtained the other party's inheritance rights. At that time, Iris even became part of the United Kingdom. The houses of Hastings and Lancaster also reached their most glorious and prosperous era. Earl John Grenville wielded great influence among both Lancastrian and Yorkist nobles. In both parties, there are many people whose ancestors received their help and favours in foreign wars. In addition, the Greenville family is small, and now there is only one granddaughter, Catherine Greenville. Although she grew up in Prince Salenberg's family, the relationship between them was very close. He was not liquidated like most of the Lancastrian party, but was confined to the manor. When Catherine heard the soldiers' discussion and wanted to read a newspaper to pass the time out of boredom, the officers met her request. "Byron, it's really Byron. The newspapers gave extensive coverage to the news about the wild hunt and the Wanman princess. It was just a small mention in the corner that the wanted criminal of the Kingdom of Hastings, the Devil's Son, was also lurking in Anchor Bay. But it was precisely this insignificant sentence that pierced through Catherine's pretended strength in front of outsiders for more than a month. However, the very next day, following this news, she received an order from King Edward IV. The king decrees that you, Countess Catherine of Grenville, be transferred to another title. The stern-looking herald delivered the news to her. This beautiful girl, who was famous throughout the north of the Channel Islands and was praised as the flower of the north, inherited her family title just after she came of age and was a genuine countess. Beautiful, wealthy, and legally the owner of the entire earldom. Where is the transfer going? Having received the news she had been waiting for a long time, Catherine calmly accepted the final judgment of the York family. Fiefdom is the foundation of the nobility, and no one would accept such an unreasonable order from the king without any reason. But since we have already lost the war, there is naturally nothing to say. Because of her grandfather's great reputation and her being a living heir, the Greenville family still had a chance to transfer the title. Too many Lancaster vassals who lost their descendants in the war had already been deprived of their fiefdoms and titles within this month. Of course, if the York family had won another great victory at Anchor Bay, Edward IV might have ignored the criticism among the nobles and seized the fiefdom in an ugly manner. But under today's internal and external troubles, stable people's hearts are obviously more precious than land, and the York family's methods have become much gentler. Catherine also sincerely thanked the Wild Hunt and the Princess of the Bay. The herald looked at the famous flower of the north with a trace of barely perceptible pity in his eyes, and coldly spat out a place name: Banton Islands. Anchor Bay. The name Wild Hunt is not only widely known among the pirate community, but also has become well known throughout the entire North Sea. The happiest person was naturally Byron himself. It has risen a little bit in just a few days. Even if it gets slower as time goes on, it's not far from the next ability increase of 25 points. Byron lay leisurely in his captain's chair, with his legs on the desk, and casually opened the ship's log. Captain, Byron Tudor, Lancaster. Bloodline, by Daiwan People Race motto, revenge is the only way to win. Sequence motto, force is better than hard work. Occupation motto, I am the pioneer. Titles, 1. The Last Lancaster, York's enemy, forever hunted, never to die. 2. The Wild Hunt Legion. Legend, 21. Spirituality, 4.2, commanding the fleet in a war that stirred up the storm, completing the decryption, and killing the Strait Fleet. Byron continued to improve. He is confident that he is promoted faster than the genius Violet. Occupation, Storm Knight. Occupation, First Class Attendant. Talents: Weather Intuition, Cognitive Correction. Professional abilities: Swordsmanship Proficiency, Mountain Goat Footsteps, Riding. Taboo Knowledge, Ritual Blood Grail/Blood Brew, 22 copies of Transmuted Blood, 1 copy of Level. Entries: Historical Revisionist, Mortal Enemy, Outlaw. Battleship, Pirate Ship Golden Hind. Special Effects, the world's fastest 3-masted sailing ship. Rare Items, Storm Signet Ring, Bloody Mary's Gourmet Recipe, Warrior's Cup, Echo Conch Pear. Contract Object, 27 alienated man-eating sharks. The road to transcendence is advancing by leaps and bounds. But it was the last 2 secrets that made Byron frown. After the war, the unlocking density of secret, Shadow of the Red and White Rose War, historical influence 31 increased from 40% to 50%. Secret, prophecy, kingship, and the prophecy of racial revival by the god of the Wild Hunt, Woden, historical influence 69. The decoding density also jumped from 11% to 15%. Although the latter had promised to help Violet keep an eye on the whereabouts of her father, the North Sea pirate king Whale Hunter, there was no rush now. One of them is at level 3 while the other is only at level 1. They are definitely thinking their lives are too long to chase after a secret with an influence of 69 that could cause a level 5 legendary pirate king to disappear. The first stop he went to before he disappeared was the Banton Islands, which are full of natives, evil spirits, and weird things. You can pay a little attention to them. But Shadow of the Red and White Rose War has clearly uncovered the main instigator of the Navy Department and the accomplice Touch of the Kraken. The solution density is still only 50%. Could it be that what is hidden behind this shadow is deeper than what I see now? Where should the next step of decryption be placed? The Channel Islands, or the Bloodthirsty Order, which is also based in the Banton Islands and is connected to the York family. Chapter 98, Thank You Gift, New Figurehead. Byron did not make up his mind immediately, but turned another page. The logbook records his daily schedule and observations from October 10, when he woke up, to today. The experience of the Battle of Anchor Bay is particularly rich, with many more pages than the sum of the other days. It includes not only what Byron himself saw and heard. There is also all the valuable information that the logbook collected from the minds of that group of law mages when they were transformed into undead servants. Whenever Byron had free time these days, he would check it over and over again, trying to find any clues that could be used as reference. Grand Justice Dude Wright holds the highest position and is personally responsible for controlling the indescribable supersized existence Kraken's touch. The secrets he had access to were no less than those of the Supreme Commander, Norwich York. It seems that the only direct superior of the two men was Edward IV, and all orders came from him. The external reason for launching the Battle of Anchor Bay was that 70% of the pirates were concentrated in Anchor Bay, the largest pirate port in the Old World. As long as we clear Iron Anchor Bay, it will be equivalent to clearing the last pirate base in the Old Continent. So that they can no longer threaten the homeland of various countries, especially the security of the island country of Hastings. But Byron turned another page and read a sentence that Edward IV had said casually. The action against Anchor Bay is not an isolated case. Both Lancaster and Anchor Bay are part of a plan. He felt that this sentence might be the key he wanted. Cracking the Admiralty conspiracy unexpectedly increased the decipherability of the Renaissance prophecy by 4%. This shows that there is indeed an intrinsic connection between the two events, and they are not isolated events. If you want to talk about what Lancaster and Anchor Bay have in common. First, we are all descendants of the Taiwanese people as prophesied. Second, we are not that devout to the Church and the Creator. Next, to determine whether the shadow behind the Red and White Rose War is a conspiracy against the entire Bay citizens, we only need to see if there are any problems with other Bay citizen branches. When the decryption work reached this stage, other people might find it difficult to start, but Byron knew the situation on the mainland very clearly. A place immediately came to mind. After the collapse of the North Sea Empire, which was established by the ancestors of the Bay people to unify all areas along the North Sea coast. The common ancestor of the Lancaster and York families established the Kingdom of Hastings, while Violet's ancestors continued to do their old business in Anchor Bay. On the Yongjai Peninsula, another largest piece of former North Sea Empire territory, several descendants of the Bay people have established their own countries. Among them, the three Gulf countries of different sizes have formed a loose alliance for mutual support, the Kalmar Union. I heard some time ago that they had a big fight among themselves for the leadership of the alliance, and even a noble was assassinated in the street. If after a period of time, problems arise within the Kamal alliance, and a specific faction still wins. I roughly know who the shadow behind the war refers to, and then. Byron's eyes flashed with coldness, and he squeezed out 4 words from between his teeth. Move immediately. Are you kidding? If it is really confirmed that it is the Church of the Creator, in order to prevent the realization of the prophecy of the Bay people, they will be eliminated in advance. With Byron's weak arms and legs, he can't even face the papal temple in the Holy Silver Empire. Even the lower-level diocesan bishops, cathedrals, and parish churches can swat him to death like swatting a fly. There is already a White Rose who is constantly hunting the Church down, and this time it is possible that the Church's good deeds will be ruined. If you don't run away quickly, are you going to have to wait for the Inquisition under the tribunal to come and burn you at the stake? The best way to keep weeds out of a field is to plant crops. The only way to completely eliminate all traces of Woden, the god of prophecy, royal power, and wild hunt, is to fill the heads of the people of the Bay with the belief in the Creator. Even without looking at the final result, this inference seems completely reasonable. When facing these treacherous traitors of the York family, I still dared to take action by relying on the authority of the iron law of royal authority. But if I meet those ruthless people from the temple sequence, I will immediately be beaten back to my original form and become nothing more than a mere first-level attendant. Do you really think you are the son of destiny who can kill people indiscriminately regardless of their rank? Besides, the powerful Wild Hunt Legion has been consumed, and now the shadow is empty, with no sense of security at all. It's a pity that the opportunity to personally wipe out a group of third-level extraordinary people and a group of second-level extraordinary people is rare. I don't know when I will meet you again. Taking all factors into consideration, no matter what the situation in the Kalmar Union is, it is better to hide overseas first. After quietly developing and gaining enough strength, I will return to this main battlefield which seems to be becoming more and more turbulent and treacherous. Byron sprang up from his chair. Through the porthole of the captain's room, you can see the pirate port that is being repaired and rebuilt, and the vast white fog surrounding the anchor bay. The threat of the Kraken's touch to Anchor Bay has been temporarily lifted. As long as there are no problems within their own ranks, they will still be that indestructible fortress. But there is really no future in continuing to be a pirate in the North Sea. There is no unowned land on land anymore, extraordinary resources are relatively scarce, and the main sea routes have been divided up by major maritime powers. If Byron wants to realize his grand plan of building a pirate fleet and a military dispatch company, he must have enough room for development. The Banton Islands, which are closest to the mainland on the southern route, are undoubtedly the most ideal place. I've decided. After I get the privateering license and join the White Rose Camp, I'll apply to my new boss to go to the Banton Islands. At this moment, a clear and pleasant female voice suddenly came from the shore. Byron, come and see what goodies I brought you. The owner of the voice did not stop. While speaking, he had already jumped onto the golden deer like the wind, and his light footsteps were getting closer and closer. Byron pushed the door open and, as expected, saw Violet standing in front of his door. My eyes suddenly lit up. Today she did not wear the shirt and trousers that were convenient for battle in the past. Instead, she wore a lady's dress with white lace edges and a pair of crystal high heels. The long silver hair is simply tied up with a sapphire blue headband that is the same color as the eyes, leaving only a strand of silver in front of the forehead, adding a playful yet bookish air. Although this gunpowder artist did not embark on the extraordinary path of becoming a master artist, she still exudes elegance and agility from the inside out. Even with Byron's self-control, he would never dare to utter the word generally. Come on, follow me and see the craftsmanship of a third-level craftsman and artist. Violet naturally pulled Byron to the bow and took out a brand new bow statue from the traveler's bag. This is. The first time he saw it, Byron's eyes lit up with a golden light. Brooke, Gus, and Eight Fingers, who were training swordsmanship with a group of sailors nearby, also gathered around. How is it? The new figurehead has been transformed. Is it completely different from the original one? The girl's eyes were smiling like crescent moons, and she looked ready to receive endless praise. Indeed, the goddess of vengeance who originally held a torch and a dagger with a ferocious face now completely changed into a completely different appearance. His body shrank by half in size and became the appearance of a child with a pair of deer antlers on his head. With a pair of wings spread out behind him and a small bow and arrow in his hands, he did not look ferocious, but rather cute and harmless. Even if Redbeard were to be resurrected, it would be absolutely difficult to recognize it. But the change in appearance is secondary. The most important thing is how much of the figurehead's abilities are retained. Byron gently placed his hand on its head and activated Echoes of History. A line of text automatically appeared in the logbook. Figurehead Angel of Vengeance: the only effect, revenge. Shout loudly for the other party to surrender. If the other party does not surrender or even dares to fight back, they will be killed and will be marked by the figurehead. There will be an invisible anchor connecting them, forcibly locking the other party as the ship's mortal enemy. The bow in the hands of the Angel of Vengeance will shoot out a ray of light that covers all the artillery on its own warship, giving them temporary blessings. If you fire at this time, you will get a 30% trajectory correction, which will effectively increase your hit rate by 30%. Originally, the ability of the Goddess of Vengeance, Hate Mark, was to forcibly lock the target ship within her shooting range. It was a magical skill for the slower third-level ships, but it was useless against the Golden Hind, the fastest three-masted ship in the world. The second ability is to trigger a counterattack bonus after being hit. Although the two abilities have now become one, the passive ability has been changed to active attack, and the 20% trajectory correction has been increased to 30%. It is more suitable for the Golden Deer, which is known for its speed and attack power. Yes, I am very satisfied. Your craftsmanship is really amazing, Miss Artist. Although it was a second-hand item, Byron still couldn't put it down. Golden Deer is a second-hand pirate ship, and its pets are also a group of second-hand sharks. Now it has obtained a second-hand bow statue. They were all relics he inherited from his former captains. As a qualified confidant, how could Byron dislike the love and care of the two bosses, Salmon Blood Eyes and Edward Redbeard? Their spirits in heaven must be very pleased. Besides, starting a business is difficult nowadays, so what's the point of picking up second-hand goods? Even if it's ninth-hand goods, it doesn't matter, as long as it can be used. Byron knew that his situation of looking for kind people to beg for alms was quite good. Many descendants of impoverished nobles or some wandering knights like to find second-hand nobles who are rich and powerful, especially widows. How one looks or even his or her age is secondary, but the most important thing is to be able to achieve success overnight, which can at least save them 20 years of hard work. The best off and most sought after among this group are the noble ladies who have no male heirs in their families but own a large amount of second-hand property. Every year, there are endless news reports of knights who wanted to take shortcuts and died in duels due to jealousy. Just one success is enough to inspire countless successors to follow suit. Who can resist such temptation? At this moment, he suddenly heard Violet behind him, changing her usual vigorous and decisive tone and whispering in an embarrassed tone, "Well, good citizen, can I ask you a question?" Chapter 99. Privateering License, Pirate General. Seeing this, the guardian knight Brooke, who was most observant of people's expressions, would certainly not continue to get in the way here, and quickly gestured to the pirates around him. Everyone immediately covered their mouths and retreated quietly. "Hey? What's the problem?" Byron looked at the girl behind him, who seemed a little nervous. Violet stood in front of Byron, who had grown a lot taller during this period. She looked up and finally mustered up the courage to ask the question she had been holding back for a long time. "Good citizen, are you willing to become a true permanent citizen of Anchor Bay and be the first mate of my Flaming Rose?" It was a close call. Byron almost blurted out, "You are a good man." Others can't resist this temptation, but he can. However, even if the situation is not as imagined, she cannot be given the position of first mate. There is no other reason, he is just afraid that this Taiwanese princess is not strong enough. Even if he didn't backstab her, she would definitely not be able to withstand the endless bad luck. "Ms. Artist, although I would like to agree to your request, the destiny of the holy relic on me requires Lancaster not to be inferior to others." A direct rejection was too hurtful, and Byron couldn't explain clearly how serious concern came about. The only option is to release the iron nail of nation destruction again, using the excuse that the side effects of this holy relic do not allow it. "I see, I was presumptuous. Besides, you, Lancaster, were not supposed to spend the rest of your life in this little Anchor Bay. I have my mission, and you naturally have your responsibility." After learning Byron's true identity, Violet didn't have much hope. After finally getting the answer, I felt relieved and breathed a sigh of relief. However, the York family, the traitors of the Bay citizens, have always been our common enemy. I look forward to continuing to fight alongside you in the future, Mr. Good Citizen. The girl tilted her head and smiled, then playfully extended a jade white little finger to him. "Of course, Miss Artist." Byron smiled back and made a pinky promise with her. The anchor between the two was visibly stronger. "However, although I cannot be your first mate, are you willing to be an honorary crew member of the Golden Deer? Outlaw, as a guiding light for the outlaws, you understand the law and can use the 10 commandments of pirates to protect your crew. Your team will no longer be your weak spot when facing the Hastings Lomage. For criminals, with this protection, it is easy to escape the trial of Hastings law. As long as I am not hit by swords and lead bullets, I can do whatever I want. Commandment 5, women are not allowed to join the team. If a crew member takes a woman to sea, he will be executed, except for female extraordinary people. Although Violet, whether she is a third-level craftsman or a princess of the Bay, it is impossible for her to board the ship and go to sea with him at this stage. But it is not a problem to become an honorary crew member, reserve a place in advance, and enjoy the protection of the lawless outlaws. Violet agreed without a second thought. He signed his name on the big book, The 10 Commandments of Pirates, that Byron took out. We can also see Byron's ambition from this thick book of 10 Commandments, which is over 100 pages long. This alone makes them much better than other pirates who just wait to die in Anchor Bay. Only when she saw the words "sheep, the only uses for food" written on it did she give him a slight look with a slightly blushing cheek. "Then what are your plans next?" He quickly changed the subject and covered up the past. "I'm ready to go on an overseas route." Byron was just about to describe his grand blueprint to her. "Captain, the Lighthouse Union just received news that the Hastings Admiralty has issued a call-up order. Our chance has come." Brooke hurried back with a document, and a hint of joy appeared on his face, which was as cold as marble. Byron took it, glanced at it, and handed it back to Violet. "Didn't we deliberately let a group of privateers and free pirates escape? They are all the ones who recognize Executioner Bill the most. If only one Golden Deer was left after the war, it would definitely seem too out of place. But if I join now, maybe because of Redbeard's merit list, I won't be suspected and I can even get a good position. The last sentence is meaningful. I cannot be your first mate, but I shall be glad to be a privateer under Edward IV. Kingston, the capital of Hadding's, Oasis Palace. In mid-November, the first heavy snow fell after the new owner took over. The fluttering snowflakes dyed the palace complex and even the entire capital pure white. But the same snow can give different viewers different moods and completely different experiences. If Edward IV and his vassals had seen it a few days ago, they would have thought that the whole world was the color of white roses, and there was no trace of Lancaster. But now, a few days later, I see it as a vast expanse of white, clean and desolate, just like the white carnations at the funerals of noble families. Edward IV was very busy during this period. He frequently summoned his important ministers to the palace to discuss how to deal with the current dire situation. The person who came to his private study today was the newly appointed Admiral of the Kingdom's Navy and his reliable ally, the Kingmaker Earl of Warwick. Your Majesty, the Pope's Bull of Accountability has already been delivered. The Knights of Inquisition from the Inquisition under the religious court will also arrive in the capital tomorrow. How should we respond? The Archbishop of Canterbury cannot withstand this kind of pressure, right? Edward IV pinched his forehead hard. Any king would instinctively hate such an institution in which the Church usurped royal authority. But he didn't have the confidence to say no to the Church. He did receive secret support from some powerful people in the Church, but some taboos still could not be made public. The new Archbishop of Canterbury is only the Church's liaison with us. We have even more important supporters in the Council before God of St. Peter's Cathedral in the Holy Silver Empire. Find a scapegoat to give an explanation to the people in the court. Do you still need me to teach you this? The Admiral hesitated for a moment, then put the blame on General Norwich and Chief Justice Dude Wright. Edward IV nodded expressionlessly. I will order all their titles to be stripped as punishment. Using forbidden knowledge to summon the touch of the Kraken was their personal act and had nothing to do with the kingdom. This is the final fact. After making this ruthless decision, he accidentally saw the Lighthouse Weekly that had been placed on the table. The sentence above, "Those who break their promises must be extra careful," is particularly striking. After being dim for a moment, his eyes became exceptionally sharp again. I did nothing wrong. Henry V of the House of Lancaster once established great achievements, but by the time of Henry VI, the Mad King, the country's fortunes began to decline again. But Henry VI ultimately lost his throne not because he was a crazy tyrant. On the contrary, he is a sage recognized by both our enemies and ourselves. He was thrifty, elegant, kind-hearted, caring for his people, focusing on education, and establishing many universities, but he had little interest in war. A backbone figure belonging to the lawful good camp. But such people are often not cruel enough, and are obviously not as suitable to be a king as those in the lawful evil camp. His ultimate defeat in the 100 Years' War against Iris also became the fuse for the 30 Years' Civil War. Edward IV folded up the newspaper and threw it into the drawer, then heard Admiral Warwick continue. Your Majesty, the Strait Fleet suffered heavy losses. We will need to replenish our warships and sailors. The financial situation of the kingdom is worrying. The large-scale development of privateers at this stage can solve our imminent problems. Not only can you get a group of useful armed forces without spending your own money, but you can also continuously reap huge amounts of wealth. I heard that the Kingdom of Castile used its fleet to bring back tons of gold and silver from the Bantayan Islands. Privateers would have great potential if they went to the ocean routes. If we can just seize a few of their ships, we'll have enough money to build them. The Admiralty has issued a call for privateers. This is the application sent by the current free pirate captain, please take a look. In several lists, the famous executioner Bill was on the list, and his position was very high. The heavy losses of the Channel Fleet have forced us to make an urgent shift in our overseas policy. I suggest selecting a group of prestigious and powerful pirate captains, and having you issue charters to allow them to recruit their own ships and sailors to form official privateering groups. He was even awarded the title of Pirate General. It can replace the naval fleet overseas and take on some of the work of protecting the colonies. Edward IV read it without objection and stamped his seal on the document to make it official. Let's do it this way. Historians tell us that the first explosion of human wealth began when people learned to grow crops and raise animals. When the time comes, the crops will mature, the cattle and sheep will give birth to their own calves, and the vegetables will continue to grow after being cut, greatly improving the efficiency of wealth accumulation. The same is true for pirates. When a group of pirates have higher pursuits besides drinking, gambling, and playing with women, we just need to wait for them to grow up and then harvest them. The young king looked up, his eyes full of ambition. Astronomers from the tower sequence have long since confirmed that our world is a giant sphere. Beyond our old continent, there is an infinitely vast world. I assert that the future of this world lies on this ocean before us, as long as we occupy enough land overseas. Then in the land of Haddings, it would be possible that the sun would set on one colony and the sun would just rise on another. Mr. Warwick, you will eventually witness with me the kingdom of Haddings gradually grow into such a powerful country. Chapter 100, Homecoming, Uninvited Guests. By mid-November, strong winds and high sea conditions occurred frequently in the North Sea, and the sea was no longer navigable. Except for those naval cruisers and privateering pirates who were anxious to escape and dared to risk their lives to venture into the offshore areas some time ago. Any pirate ship below level 4 that dares to set sail at this time is tantamount to putting half of its life under the scythe of the god of death. But there are exceptions to everything. On this day, a 3-masted sailing ship flying the black-bottomed Blood Cross flag of the Kingdom of Hastings quietly appeared on the rough sea. It even took advantage of the biting wind from behind, splitting the waves and flying like an arrow at a speed unmatched by other pirate ships of the same era. Even without the iconic pirate flag. But the unique flat deck design and horizontal and vertical sails also allow colleagues who have seen it to recognize it at a glance. This is the golden deer that bid farewell to the Taiwanese Princess Violet and set out on a new journey. World's fastest 3-masted ship tidal effects. It can increase the designed normal speed by an additional 20%, and reduce the impact of severe weather such as big waves, strong winds, heavy rain, etc. on it by 20%. Chapter 61. What are big waves for others are just medium waves for it. At this time, the North Sea may have been a restricted area for other small ships, but it was the back garden where the golden deer could come and go freely. The wind direction has changed. Correct the course 1 compass point to the east and adjust the windward side. Yes, sir. The rigging hands will adjust the sail to the windward. Byron personally held the steering wheel and steered his beloved sailboat, like a knight riding the north wind. Challenging the storms that others dare not challenge is in line with the path and professional motto of the storm knight. The spirituality in the body is growing every moment. Although the increase is extremely small, it is a long-lasting one and has gone straight from 4.2 to the first order limit of 5 points. If others could experience those thrilling events like him and survive, they could also become the survivors and make rapid progress. Thrust. Cut. Amid the loud shouts, one can see that on the deck, in addition to the sailors performing their duties, there is also a group of elite pirates from the Marine Corps, who are lined up in neat rows and practicing the fisher sword technique diligently. In the biting cold wind, although they all took off their shirts, revealing their muscular chests, their heads were still steaming and almost formed white mist. The knife in his hand flashed like white waves, and the biting murderous aura was colder than the north wind. Byron was not idle during this time in Anchor Bay. Taking advantage of the vacuum period when many captains were killed or injured and the pirate ship capsized, he replenished the sailors on his ship to the full complement of 100 people. The Marine Corps, which accounts for half of the total personnel, has finally begun to take shape. Moreover, Byron repeatedly confirmed that there were no spies planted by any other forces here, and their initial loyalty was all above the passing line. Echoes of history. Reading a person's history is not about directly reading his thoughts, but about giving a quantitative evaluation based on what he has done. It can also be called, judge by actions, not by heart. The quantified data is not static. For example, if you secretly curse the captain, or turn a blind eye to something that harms the captain's interests, etc., it will be reflected in the numerical value. There is no such thing as a mandatory loyalty lock. In addition, although there are still no extraordinary people among this group of pirates, most of them are talented and have the possibility of spiritual awakening. Byron looked at them and nodded with satisfaction. Besides myself, there are also Guardian Knight Iron Walbrook and Phantom Blade Guts, who will not suddenly disappear only by anchoring to me, on the ship. With these two extraordinary people who will never betray me protecting me, I will form a core team that possesses the highest military force. No matter how many new crew members come, no matter how rebellious they can't make any waves. Moreover, the transmutation blood refined by the third-level Grand Justice is indeed extraordinary in effect. Just by adding one extra drop to the original Angel's Kiss, the honest man 8 Fingers, the native gunner Wyandotte, and the carpenter Little Hans all achieved spiritual breakthroughs one after another. All we need to do next is to help them complete the promotion ceremony. After the war, Byron continued to snowball using the forbidden knowledge he had mastered. Transform the gains in Anchor Bay into real power. Kill enemies, brew blood brew, strengthen the group's strength, and then hunt stronger enemies in turn to brew higher quality blood brew. The strength of Golden Deer suddenly ushered in a period of rapid explosion. There are 3 prerequisites to becoming a transcendent: spiritual sublimation, prior knowledge, and an inauguration ceremony. But these 3 guys took 3 different career paths. One is a Taiwanese berserker, one is a artillery expert, and the other is a craftsman. The ritual medium required varies. The 8-finger is the simplest, requiring a copy of the Pirate 10 Commandments and a Bay Clan battle axe that has killed at least 10 people as a medium. Wyandotte needed a book of his own artillery notes that would condense all his insights into the study of artillery and reflect his own experiences and insights. The craftsman, Hans Little, needs to make a micro-creation with his own hands that is different from his predecessors and more useful. Or make a contribution to a completely new invention and complete the mission it carries with it. The good news is that the Golden Deer, as a pirate ship, can fully satisfy the promotion ceremony for all of them. All that's left is to complete an overwhelming robbery. Let the honest 8 fingers have a hearty 5-man kill. Wyandotte hit the enemy ship with 3 shells in a row, and if it is not continuous, it needs to be recalculated. Little Hans didn't have to do anything. While others were working, he just had to stay on the boat and make sure he didn't get killed. As long as the Golden Deer can successfully do something and play the role of a pirate ship, he can be promoted at any time. Next, there will be no chance to hold the ceremony in the mainland of Hastings, so we can only look for another opportunity on the way to the Banton Islands. Byron fished a letter from his pocket. The above is the reply with the seal of the Admiralty after he applied for a privateering license in the name of Executioner Bill. All privateers and would-be privateers that have not yet obtained privateering licenses are required to gather at Felixstowe, the port closest to the royal capital Kingston. Then, they formed a joint fleet with the Navy warships going to the colonies for defense, the kingdom's merchant ships, the colonial ships, and the nobles who were taking office in the territories, and headed for the Banton Islands together. At that time, the Navy Department will also determine an indefinite number of pirate generals and grant them the right to form personal privateering fleets. With Executioner Bill's prestige in the Redbeard fleet and privateers, he has great hope of becoming a pirate general. Change side with the wind. The Golden Hind headed south, and after several changes of direction with the wind, it soon passed the Markle Frogga Lighthouse, the northernmost point of the Channel Islands, and completely entered the waters near the Kingdom of Hattings. They also hung the flag from the bowsprit that had been sent by the Admiralty with the letter. As long as they have this flag, the pirate ships going to the rendezvous will not be attacked by any navy, whether they are wanted or not, and will be eligible to enter the capital area with impunity. Of course, it also means that your ship is the mobile territory of Hastings, and the lawmasters have the power of life and death. Dogs must be put on a leash. The York family is not philanthropists and is afraid that they will be retaliated against by these lawless guys. Unfortunately, the criminal group Golden Deer led by an outlaw is a wolf with a black heart. Arriving here, close to the land, the wind and waves finally died down a lot, and other merchant ships engaged in short-distance transportation between ports on the island could gradually be seen. Continuing forward, towards noon, we gradually approached a landmark and prosperous port in the north of the Channel Islands. Even if we maintain a speed of 13 knots, it will still take a full day to reach the capital from here. However, Byron suddenly ordered, "Stop the boat, break the sailboat." By pulling the turning rigging, all the sails maintained wind balance, allowing the Golden Deer to quietly stop on the sparkling sea. Byron, wearing a cashmere cloak, walked to the bulwark and looked quietly at the scenery on the shore with a distant gaze. In eyes as blue as the sea, the port city in front and the mountains behind are reflected, and I can't bear to move away. In the midst of nostalgia, I mutter to myself. The Geld Highlands are mountainous and range from endless forests to gently rolling fields of low green grass and moss. In summer, the sun always likes to stay for a long time at sunrise and sunset, creating the most beautiful sunrises and sunsets in the world. In winter, the day becomes a brief moment that connects dawn and dusk, and it cannot be stopped no matter how hard you try. Brooke also walked to his side silently, also a little absent-minded. Because the land on the shore is none other than the territory of Prince Sorenberg, it is also the place where Byron and Brooke grew up together. Although the family has lived in the royal capital most of the time in recent years, even Prince Sorenberg, who is busy with affairs, will return to his territory for a short stay every summer. There are towering castles, bouncing ponies, and endless green pastures. But things have changed. My uncle, father, and cousin Edward, who often came here to play, are all gone. There is one last relative left here, and the one who cried to the adults, "Why does Byron have a little choo-choo? I want one too. I want one too." Byron got a beating for nothing, and from then on his childhood sweetheart never took a bath with him or walked his bird with him again. If that violent woman whose childhood nicknames were Dog Seeing Sorrow and King of Children could also be called childhood sweetheart. Byron's memories are filled with endless beauty, but what is right before their eyes is only their hometown, to which they can never return. Suddenly, "Captain, look at that ship in the harbour." Byron looked in the direction Brooke pointed. Among the many ships anchored outside Sorenborg, one stood out from the crowd. On the huge white sail was painted a silver cross with a crown on its head. That is the symbol of the church. This is nothing strange. As the most powerful force in the entire continent, the tentacles of this behemoth are naturally everywhere. The key point is that the flag hanging on the mast is actually a burning stake with iron nails nailed on it. That's the Inquisition? How did we run into this bunch of lunatics? Byron's heart skipped a beat.